across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company. Thank you very much indeed. I bet you can't guess what we're talking about today, eh? And if you do miss any of the show, by the way, you don't forget to go to my YouTube page. We've cunningly called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. So you have no excuse for not finding it. And if you hit subscribe, you will never miss a thing. But coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about... although that said, I'm going to give some figures here, but genuinely, depending on where you read this, or what was said in court, or what was said in the House of Commons yesterday, or which newspaper you believe, completely different numbers have been mentioned. But as far as we can gather, almost 7,000 Afghan nationals are being relocated to the UK, many of them already here, after a massive data breach by the Ministry of Defence. Successive governments tried to keep secret with a super injunction. The breach contains the details of some 25,000 Afghans and their family members who had helped British troops during the war with the Taliban. Well, many of them had claimed to have helped. They weren't vetted at the time. This list was actually released on the social media. It's believed as many as 100,000 people are impacted in total, and the British government only informed everyone yesterday. This is a Labour government after the cover-up by the Tory government, 3.5 years after their data was compromised. Now, the MOD says the relocation costs alone will be some £850 million, with the potential, we have been told in the court, to rise to £7 billion. No idea, as far as we can tell, where that figure has come from. Is that a lifetime cost? Is that for other people if they were brought here? No one seems to be very clear. Meanwhile, the Taliban claims the leaked list of Afghans has been in its possession since 2022, and it's been hunting down those names ever since. It's an extraordinary story. We will be talking to former defence attaché in Kabul a little bit later in the show. In about 15 minutes, we're going to be talking to Michael Gove, who was a government minister, around the time when this would have all been exposed. We're going to be talking about all of that. I want to hear your thoughts as well. Get in touch. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1 standard network rate. Message your thoughts on this. I know Mike G has been talking about this morning as well. But here's the thing, was it justified to keep it quiet for the first few months? As a mess up, data breach. When you find out about it a couple of years later, do you then keep it quiet so you can get these people who are most at risk out of the country, and then you make it plain? Is there any justification for that? Or is there any justification at all? I'm really struggling to find it, to keep it quiet for all the years it has been kept quiet. 3 years since they found out about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Also going to be talking about the almost half the number of people on universal credit, the main working age benefit in this country now, are now not required to look for work. A load of other people who are required to look for work are looking for work but haven't got a job, even though I'm pretty sure if you're looking for work, you can find a job pretty quickly if you really want one. More than 1 million people who are foreign-born are claiming the benefit. Many of those are EU citizens. But remember, they're a benefit to the country economically, as we've always been told, even though they don't earn enough money or have a job where they can support themselves. But definitely net benefits to the country. Meanwhile, also, inflation has jumped higher than many expected to 3.6% in the year to June. That's up from 3.4% the previous month. That's according to Office for National Statistics figures. Also, rather wonderful news in the last hour. Do you remember the story about the nurse, Sandy Peggy, who was at NHS Fife in a hospital and rather unhappy, not unreasonably, I think most of us would agree, both men and women, are being forced as a woman in a woman's changing room to change her clothes down to her underwear, to change to a uniform in front of a male doctor who claimed he was a trans woman, but was, of course, and still is, and will always be a man. Well, she's won her case. She complained about it. She's sent to a tribunal, but lawyers say that she has been cleared of all gross misconduct allegations. Delighted to hear that. We'll talk about that later in the show as well. So all that coming up, loads and loads and loads more as well, loads of top guests, and they include, delighted to say, joining me today, since Claire has sorted off on holiday, not to Afghanistan, I may point out, Matthew Lawser, former Labour Party advisor. A very good morning to you.
And good morning to you, Julia.
Nice to get you back in the studio.
Always a pleasure.
where do we even...
No, I mean...
Where do we start in Afghanistan? I'm just going to try and run through a little bit. As far as I can make out. Now, this emerged at midday yesterday. We were on air and I was handing this piece of paper out. Incredibly convoluted story. Could not make head nor tail of it. We put it out as breaking news a couple of times, but it was really, while you were on air, trying to work out what the hell's going on. As far as we can gather, because the story seems to have changed quite, in 2021, remember, we had the evacuation of Kabul. My goodness, we covered it every single day. We also, from then on, were covering, the number of Afghan, translators and others who were desperately trying to get out of the country. And many were not taken out of the country. There's a man I've still been in touch with. We called him Sammy on the show, still trying to get out of the country with his wife and daughter, despite having worked for the British, US, and I think German as well, authorities to help them as a translator. In 2022, there was a data leak. Some 19,000 people's information was leaked. That was in February 2022. No one knew about it. It was an email that was sent out that shouldn't have gone out to with a load of people's names on it, to about 100 people, but those 19,000 names went on it. The MOD didn't find out. This is from February 2022 until August 2023. So the MOD found out. Why? Because someone put some of those names onto Facebook and went, can leak the rest of them. Now, we understand initially there was a thing called D-notice. Now, this is basically a national security. You've worked in government, you know these things where there are sometimes, for instance, things like, Prince Harry is serving in Afghanistan for 6 months. No one's allowed to print it. Everyone agrees, keep it quiet and the like. For national security, for individual safety. I think we'd understand there might be some justification for that while you notify these people. An awful lot of people weren't notified their names were on this list. And then a super injunction was imposed by the courts here. And a super injunction, we remember this from the footballers, the top businessmen. Basically, someone makes an accusation against you and you're defending it questionably a lot of the time. Not only are people not allowed to report the details of that case, they're not even allowed to report that a super injunction exists. Yeah. So nothing. Complete news blackout. Daily Mail, The Times were onto this and were basically trying to get this, and they were told, no, super injunction. And it is not until 23 months later, yesterday, that super injunction was lifted at midday by the current Defence Secretary, John Healey. Matthew, what is the biggest, most egregious issue here?
Well, I mean, clearly the most egregious mistake was the most expensive email in history, which is going to cost the British taxpayer, we're not quite sure how many billions, but I think the super injunction and for such a prolonged period, I think you hit the nail...
cover-up.
The cover-up. I think you hit the nail on the head. Initial concerns, D-notice, which prevents media organisations reporting for a limited period, is one thing. But a super injunction which was going to go on and on and on is another. Look, I'm really glad that John Healey and the government have lifted it. I mean, it's taken them a year to do it. They say it's because they were getting things in order, and they did this review, which actually came out yesterday.
But there are still people to get out, so I'm not quite sure how that's justified.
Yeah, well, also, I think one thing that the Labour government has done is it has slimmed down the number of people who are on the list who it thinks should be a priority for coming. So now, not everybody on the list is going to be able to come.
And they've closed it. And this is all part, because the Operation Rubific, I don't know, that was the covert airlifting of thousands of Afghans to the UK. So we've got the data leak. That's a mistake, okay, in the first place. The guy who wrote that email that accidentally BCC'd, other people, still working at the MOD, we're told.
We're not on Afghanistan, though. That's okay.
Oh, well, that's okay. He's just putting other people's lives at risk in another country around the world. Well done. Brilliant. Well done, everybody. The cover-up, initial cover-up, going on so long, why it went on so long. One of the reasons I find extraordinary is one of the arguments that government lawyers made in court was that they couldn't lift the injunction because they warned of a risk of public disorder. Genuinely, the view of the government, whether it's Tory or Labour, of the British people is so contemptuous. Oh, we'll find something out that you've done stupidly and all wrong, and then we're going to go and riot. I mean, it's just outrageous. People in this country were very, very welcoming of the idea that people who had helped our troops in Afghanistan were trying to, on the side of good, that they should, who were then at risk when the Taliban took over, should they be allowed to come to this country. People were very supportive of that, actually, very, very supportive on this. So the key thing here is, so there's been no scrutiny in Parliament or by the public or by the media of this airlift. No scrutiny of the cost. It was projected in court to cost £7 billion. Government now says it's under £1 billion, but now we've got a lawsuit representing thousands of these people. It's looking like that's going to be £1 billion in terms of legal redress. we've had no oversight of who these thousands of Afghans are who've been secretly brought here. We know at least one was not someone who had helped the government, but one who had said, I got this list, I will release this list in full to the Taliban if you don't allow me to come to Britain with my family. So we've got that guy here, great. None of these people were vetted. These were people who had applied. The British taxpayer is going to foot the bill, a huge cost. We don't know how much it is. And now we're told, well, you know, they've closed this project now, that they've shut down the scheme. There are 70,000 people left in Afghanistan, but a total of almost 24,000 will come here. 18,500 have arrived or are due to arrive. They're living in MOD homes. A lot of them, again, they're not translators, a lot of these people. That's why they're not on the Arab scheme. So they don't speak English. They're bringing their families. 4, 5, 6 kids, you know, when they say they're close families, does that include parents? Does that include brothers and sisters? I don't know. We're talking about a huge number of people who've come to this country because of a erroneous email, and we're paying for it cost-wise, and it's costing an absolute fortune to the taxpayer, and we weren't told about it. That is an outrage.
Absolutely, and I think that, you know, you're right, Julia, to say that this concern that it was going to cause public disorder. Actually, I thought it might have reduced public disorder, because if people knew that people who got angry about migrant hotels in their area knew that some of those migrants, at least, were people who had assisted British forces on active duty, then they might have been less likely to riot rather than more likely.
I think the British people are better than this.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, the lack of scrutiny, and I think what's going to happen is in Parliament. Obviously, yesterday the Defence Secretary was grilled for 2 hours, but I think there's going to be such a sort of lingering anger and resentment about this that there's going to be a lot of questions.
And again, this was on the Tory watch. They own this. I mean, you know, all credit to John Healey for you know, fessing up to what the MOD has done. I think this would have happened if Labour had been in charge as well, to be honest with you. I think this is just that's just the way that governments are these days. But I mean, Ben Wallace, when he was Defence Secretary, he's done interviews, he's done an article for a newspaper today. He's defending the decision, but he's sort of saying, well, I didn't apply for the super injunction. I don't know why we got that. That was a lawyer decision. You've got to wonder, like, how many people knew about this, who knew about it, and when, and who agreed to it. People haven't been allowed legally. They've not been allowed to talk about it. They would be in contempt of court. They would literally be in prison themselves. We're going to be talking to Michael Gove very soon. He's the Lord Gove now, former Conservative minister, about, you know, what he knew, whether he thinks it's the right thing or not to do. But I think for a lot of people, the concern about immigration ties into this. We know now, we finally do have information on criminality among different nationalities who come to this country. Afghans are not just at the top of the list, they are way at the top of the list in terms of their convictions for serious crimes in this country, and minor crimes. Well, not that any crime is minor to the person who's the victim. So there'll be a lot of concern that we haven't brought in people who are good, you know, good people who've helped our forces, who want to make a new life for themselves and have had to escape the Taliban because they would have been, and their families would have been killed because they'd helped British forces. We don't know who a lot of these people are. They've not been vetted in the same way as people who helped our forces. And I'm sorry, we have people have an understandable and justified concern about people coming from particular countries where there is a high rate of criminality in terms of the people who've been here. It's a reasonable concern to make.
Yeah, look, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we need to know whether it's people from Afghanistan or anywhere else, who's coming into the country, who they are, if they've got convictions, and, you know, the filter should be there. In terms of the blame game, we're seeing every ex-Tory Defence Secretary and junior ministers all rushing into print this morning to put their side of the story. Everybody at the moment seems to be saying, oh, it's Grant Shapps' fault because he's the one who hasn't yet appeared on the airwaves, but he was the last Defence Secretary. But, of course, surely the rest of the Cabinet and the Prime Minister knew.
Prime Minister must have known.
That's the big question.
This is high up it went, and again, and the fact that this guy who did this email is still employed. No, everyone's allowed to make a mistake at work. You know, we've all done it, but wow. And is it a system problem? We're told that the system has changed. Blah, 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 all of that. You know, that's what we're always told. I want to hear from you. Please give me a call. 0344 499 1000. Is there any justification for what the Tory government did? Is there any justification at all? Can you see that, even for just the first few months of this, or absolutely not? And what are you most angry about? If you are angry about it, and I'm pretty sure you are, because everyone who, if you're not paying attention, you're not angry, but are you more angry about being lied to, being kept in the dark, about the huge cost, about the number of people coming here, about the initial mistake? What are you most, the cover-up? I want to know, what are you most angry about? What is the biggest concern for you here? And by the way, if you'd been told about it sooner, would you have been out rioting on the streets, which is what the court was told by government lawyers? Outrageously. Apparently we will riot over anything in this country, despite the fact that actually we're one of the, I don't know if this is a sentence, but the least rioty country. I mean, have you been to France, guys? Have you been to France? I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222 and get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Also want to talk about inflation. I love it when the economists didn't predict it to be this. The economists never get it. Whatever the economists predict is always going to be wrong. 3.6% inflation now. Big concerns that as inflation goes up, less likely the Bank of England will move faster to bring in cost of lending down, interest rates down. This the day after Rachel Reeves does her big Mansion House speech, which, it plays out big on the Financial Times, but frankly, no one else is even paying attention. She's a lame duck chancellor. Everyone's waiting for the tax rises in the autumn. She's fiddling around, fiddling while Rome burns when it comes to mortgages. It's talking about cutting red tape on the neck of businesses after just putting a tax on jobs a few months ago, and saying we have to stop having a negative narrative around saving and investing money in stocks and shares. I mean, come on, I know you're a Labour guy, but she's totally out of her depth, this woman, isn't she?
I don't think she's out of her depth, but I think the government as a whole needs to get a grip, because her biggest problem, as you say, is she's got to find the money in the autumn to pay for the lack of benefit reform, which has happened because...
the solution should be to do the benefit reform.
Absolutely. Well, so, I mean, I think what the government will be hoping that this review they've got of benefits will actually ultimately produce savings that are bigger or equal to. I mean, look, the Treasury, people in the Treasury were so angry when those reforms were dropped. They were thinking, OK, well, rather than putting any taxes up, let's just work out how much it is as a percentage of all spending and just take it off everybody. If the Labour backbenchers say they didn't want it, then they can have X% less of everything else.
I think the people who think we shouldn't have benefit reform should pay for it. I had that view over the lockdown. If you think that we should carry on in lockdown, fine. This is the cost of doing that to the economy. You lot share out that cost. The rest of us are going to get on with our lives. But I'm not paying for your mad decisions. I mean, the welfare reform the government was looking at was a drop in the ocean of what was needed as it was. I blame the Tories for allowing it to explode on their watch since lockdown. They've no excuse for that. They're totally not on top of it. But Labour are going to allow it to carry on, and it's going to carry on getting worse. At the end of the day, we can't afford any of these things at all. We just simply can't afford them.
Well, and you've even got reforms saying that they would have gone backwards on the reforms that Labour proposed, and they would go further, even the Labour backbenchers, and they would get rid of the 2 children benefit caps.
Oh, yeah, they're mad.
The national consensus on this appears to be from the politicians: don't do anything.
Yeah,
and that's not sustainable.
I tell you what, that national consensus. I mean, again, the BBC may like that national consensus, but actually, the hard-working people who go out and work every day, not that there are as many of those as there should be anymore, I don't feel the same way. Amazing stats though about universal credit. This is the main benefit for people of working age, okay? Whether working or not, you can get universal credit. Almost half of people on universal credit, though, are not even required to look for work. 7.9 million people are on universal credit. 3.6 million of those have no work requirement, whereas just 2.2 million are in work, but in low pay and getting. I don't know why we're subsidised. Frankly, if you're in work, you can work. You're working only part-time. Work full-time. And if you're in full-time, your pay doesn't pay. We need to up minimum wage so you can actually afford I mean, I don't know why we're subsidising low pay. I don't want to subsidise anyone working part-time. Get a full-time job. And 1.6 million people are apparently searching for work, and 500,000 people are preparing for work, whatever that means. Basically, half the people are not required to even look for work, and more than 1 million foreigners, foreign-born people, foreign nationalities still, are claiming universal credit in this country. Most of those are EU citizens who are given, indefinite leave to remain in this country. They may well be partners of people who are living here. Weren't we told by you lot that immigration was a net economic benefit to this country? We've got enough of our own layabouts. We don't need to import any more.
Well, most of those EU citizens are in work, but it's obviously, as you say, it's low-paid work.
So not a net benefit?
So, well, if you look at EU citizens overall, EU citizens do make a net benefit.
We'll take the French and the German bankers. They're paying 500,000 in tax a year. Thank you very much.
But it's people who came in the Boris wave that have massively added to the bill. That's why people like me who were against Brexit can actually say, well, actually, EU...
It's not a result of Brexit, it's a result of a stupid policy. No, but no, most of those people, no, the EU citizens were already here.
Yes,
they were allowed to
absolutely.
stay.
The ones and of course, if you came 25 years ago, you've been working, your company closes down, you lose your job. I think that's fair that you are able to claim benefits because you've been paying in.
I'm feeling that's not most of them.
Well, I don't know. You may be a cynical. 1 in 5 workers now. This is extraordinary. 1 in 5 of everybody in the labour market is a foreign citizen. So actually, these figures broadly reflect that.
Oh, good. It's all working out terribly well, everybody. They're probably all Afghans now, judging by this latest expose. Do get in touch. Lots of calls lighting up the board, but I give you the number one more time, 0344 499 1000. We're going to get your calls up next. Then we're going to be talking to Lord Gove, Michael Gove, who was a minister in the last government. What did he know and when? And was it the right decision to basically tell a complete lie, absolute news blackout on a massively expensive programme to cover up basically an MOD error in terms of that data leak of Afghanistan names? This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
The first time we've even been given this information, the first time the public's even been told what this breakdown looks like, that 1 in 6 people who are claiming universal credit aren't British. And we are a very, very generous country and people, but it's not viable to do this. It's not sustainable and it's not affordable for us to pay for everybody who comes here on the basis that they're going to contribute and then either stops working or falls on hard times or whatever it might be. People like that, unfortunately, will need to go home.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's get to your calls now. If you want to have your say, 0344 499 1000, and your messages coming in about this just absurd situation with Afghanistan. Basically, was the government right or wrong to cover up this massive data leak and for so long after all those Afghan names were leaked? Let's get to Ricky, who's texted in to say, you don't release data to Facebook by accident. It was deliberately done in the knowledge that these people would have to be brought here to be protected by the government. I think you're into a level of conspiracy theory there. Always go with incompetence, Ricky. It's nearly always the answer. Gemma says the MOD's only job is to protect the nation. Ben says any cover-up is totally wrong. People need to be held to account. Nigel says secrecy breeds mistrust. Tricky to know what the truth is and what may still be hidden. Well, exactly. Mark says, what's the point? It happened. It will almost certainly happen again. And Andrew says, when they hide information from the public because as a government it makes you look bad, then we no longer have a functioning democracy. And Richard says the MOD's only job is to protect the nation, and they have failed at that. Let's go to the phone lines. Ed is in Derbyshire, wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Ed.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. What do you want to say? What do you make of this? What's the biggest aspect of the scandal here?
Well, there's 4 points I'd like to make.
Go for it.
First of all, if they work for the British military, they'd have paperwork.
Yep.
They'd need it onto the basis so you can identify who worked for us and who didn't. Secondly, if diversity is our strength, why is it not being pushed onto Africa and the Middle East? Why aren't we more diverse over there? Thirdly,
Okay, but that's a completely different point, isn't it?
Yeah. Thirdly, you've got these people coming into this country, a Christian country. They slag this country off, and yet we don't do anything about it. It seems like Christianity is the religion.
Okay, no. That's a different argument from. I mean, you have no evidence whether or not these people who have wanted to come to Britain to be safe from the Taliban have done that. There are a lot of people who come to this country who don't seem to value any of the aspects of our life. But we don't know. Yeah, but I want to keep this conversation to Afghanistan. This particular scandal.
It is a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. The British public have been let down. It's treasonous. It is treasonous.
What do you make of the fact that the guy who wrote this original email and accidentally somehow leaked all these names by basically that email having everyone's emails on it? What do you make of the fact that apparently we know it's a he at least, is still working in the MOD?
Well, it wasn't an accident, was it? It's clearly deliberate.
Why do you think it's deliberate?
Well, because I think what we've got working in our civil service now are people that have no skin in the game regarding the protection of our country.
I think we do have an issue with that, but I don't believe anyone genuinely believes it was a deliberate move to leak these names and then keep quiet about it for a year.
I think that's the whole point. Is it was deliberate and they kept quiet about it. I
don't understand why you would think that.
Well, I just think these people, like I say, they're not honest people. There's people in the country that are saying they're here for one reason, they're here for a different reason.
I think, I'm sorry, I've got to be honest with you. I don't agree with you on a lot of that. I really don't. But you make a point about people. If you worked for the British military, you would have had paperwork. I'm with you on that one. But if you agree with Colin, so Ed, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Thank you for your call, Ed. Let's go to Colin, who is in Southend-on-Sea. Hello, Colin.
Hello, Julie. How are you doing?
Very well. What do you want to say? Are you a conspiracy theorist as well? Was this all a secret plot?
No. I'm against all this immigration. End of. It's got to stop. We are being overrun, and our culture is being affected beyond belief. It's ridiculous. Now, with these Afghans that have been brought over in secret, especially, let's just go on the righteous side and say that especially the children. Why were those people brought over here and not to a safe Arab, Muslim-speaking country?
I suppose those other countries would say, well, it's not our problem, it's your problem.
Well, we're helping them out as well, aren't we?
We are.
Help our states all over the place. But the culture shock, especially to the children, will be beyond belief, wouldn't it? And aren't we under enough stress as it is with all?
So we should have helped these people. We should have helped these people get out, but they should be in Pakistan or Saudi or somewhere else. They shouldn't be here.
No.
What about the translators? Do we not have a duty of care to those who? And they are basically sort of promised,
Yes, but what they've done, from what I can understand, it's not only the people that, like the translators, that were helping the British forces. They're bringing all their dependents over as well.
Yeah, and again, people often have very large families as well. Colin, a very good point. Thank you very much indeed. A lot of people might be agreeing with that and disagree with that. We'll take a quick break. Up next, we are going to be talking to Michael Gove. Now, Lord Gove, he was a government minister at the time that this breach happened and indeed when it was discovered. So what did he know and when? And was it the right decision by the government? Stay tuned for that. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 10:34. Delighted to welcome to the show right now Michael Gove, now Lord Gove, Conservative peer. He's now editor of The Spectator, but a former cabinet minister. Well, pretty much every Conservative government of the last goodness knows how many years. A very good morning to you, Lord Gove.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, look, you weren't Defence Secretary, but you were a very senior cabinet minister throughout this period. You were Levelling Up and Housing Secretary in the years when this was, when this was known about, this leak, and when there was this super injunction on the Afghanistan names and the cover-up being released. Were you, as a senior figure in government, close to both Boris Johnson, previous Prime Minister, and Rishi Sunak, were you aware of this super injunction?
Yes.
And when were you first told about it?
I was told about it in the final year in which I was in government, because my responsibility as the Levelling Up Secretary of State, responsible for housing and for local government, was to ensure that we could do everything that we could in order to ensure that those Afghan refugees who were in a position where they could move from Afghanistan or from adjacent countries into the United Kingdom were appropriately housed. OK,
so you were aware of it. So presumably other senior figures in government were also aware. Everyone was aware of it. Did you think it was the right thing that there should be a news blackout on that issue?
Yes.
Why?
Because it was vitally important to put the safety of those individuals who were at risk from the Taliban first. These were people who had risked their lives in order to support the British forces in a war that Parliament supported. So it was only right that we stood by them.
But a lot of the people we know on this list that was leaked were not necessarily like translators and others who'd supported this work, because they were people who had applied to go on the list. They hadn't been vetted. It's not known. We've left 70,000 of them behind. So clearly we're not that bothered. And at the time, I mean, the evacuation couple was in 2021. So a year later, well, in February 2022, this data leak happens, 19,000 people's information. It was not until August 2023, so over a year later, the MOD even found out that there had been this leak. Someone putting something on Facebook, and at that point the super injunction was imposed. I believe there was a D notice at first, which sort of prevents things for national security reasons. But in 2023, the government, the MOD, did not go and inform all the people who were on that list and say, hey, really sorry, your data's being released, you may be at risk, do you want to come to this country? They didn't inform most of the people who were on their list. So they can't have been that concerned about their safety that they needed to cover it up and have an international news blackout.
No, it's precisely because they were concerned about their safety that they wanted to make sure that the risk to them was minimised and efforts were maintained, indeed intensified.
So concerned about their safety, they didn't bother telling the very people whose names were on that list that they were at risk?
Because the wider the circulation of this information, the greater the risk to everyone involved.
So individual people were not told to protect all the other individual people that they were at risk? It doesn't really add up, does it?
No, it does precisely.
Like how? You've got different maths from me then. If you've got 19,000 people and each one of them possibly is now at risk, but not all those people have been brought to this country, will ever be brought to this country, and they've got all the dependents as well. And we know the Taliban threatens dependents as well, and family members as well as those who believe have worked with Brits. Not telling them so they could add extra protection to themselves, you thought would save more lives?
Well, again, the first thing is that the more people who are aware of the existence of this database, the greater the risk, the more the appetite of the Taliban or any other bad actor to acquire it. So making sure that as few people as possible knew about the existence of this leak was a way of maximising the safety of everyone on it.
Well, the Taliban have said, we had this list in 2022.
Forgive me, Julia, you've talked more in this interview than I have, so I'll just make this other point.
I'm asking you questions.
Exactly, and now I'm replying. And the critical thing, of course, is that many of the people who would have been on that list would have known that they were at risk because, of course, if you had been a translator, if you had been a judge, if you were a leading feminist campaigner in Afghanistan, you would have known that you would have been a prime target of the Taliban potentially, and you would have made efforts supported by the British state and the British government to escape. So the question that any critic must ask themselves is, what would they have done in the circumstances? Obviously, a terrible error was made by one single individual, and that is deeply regrettable because of the consequences and the risks to which individuals were put. But we have a moral obligation to ensure that those who worked with British forces were protected. We have a moral obligation to ensure that as many of them as possible are brought to safety. This is a fraught and dangerous enterprise in which individual British soldiers put themselves at risk in order to help people come to this country. So in that respect, well, of course there are regrettable elements. The decisions taken both by the last government and this government are right.
I think some people could argue and understand that it was the right decision to keep it quiet in the first few months, or maybe even the first year, while they're trying to get people out and make sure to minimise the risk to people. But we're talking about 3 years that this has continued. That suggests that that was a cover-up to protect basically, the reputation of the Conservative government. I mean, one of the claims made in court, we're told... Can I just finish the question? One of the arguments made in court was that if people were told about this, there would be the risk of public disorder, because, of course, the British people just riot whenever they're told correct information. But 3 years looks more like a cover-up for reputational damage rather than about protecting people's lives. Do you understand that?
I do understand that. I do understand why some people might think that, but they would be wrong because, firstly, it was the case that a new government, the Labour government, looked at the evidence when they came to power. They considered that initially it was important to maintain this level of operational secrecy. Secondly, quite rightly, the new Secretary of State for Defence commissioned an independent figure to look at the case for maintaining this level of secrecy. They concluded, as you quite rightly point out, that the elapse of time meant that it was no longer necessary to maintain that super injunction. But here there is always a balance of risk. The idea that this was maintained for political convenience is offensive. The reason it was maintained was on the advice of those who were involved in ensuring that individuals who were at risk could be protected.
So why is the current government, OK, it's a year into power, they said John Healey, the Defence Secretary now under Labour, says he's instigated a review very early on when he was told about this, presumably in his early days in office. Why were they able to conclude that actually it wasn't necessary to keep this super injunction?
Well, precisely because they thought that it was appropriate, looking at this policy, initially to maintain it, and then to consider whether the elapse of time, the number of people who had successfully been evacuated or had otherwise found their way from Afghanistan to safety, was now such that on the balance of risk, that it was no longer necessary to maintain that super injunction. And they concluded that it wasn't, and I think that that was an appropriate and timely decision. So I have no criticism of John Healey or the decision that he made. OK. A lot of British people are very unhappy about the costs involved, and the court kept hearing this £7 billion figure of the of bringing these people back into Britain and a lot of their dependents. That figure, we're now told by John Healey, is nothing close to that. It's going to be under £1 billion, although there's £1 billion in possible legal costs fighting cases for basically for the leak and the damage that's done to people's lives. Although I'd thought a lot of those people who were here, probably their lives are improved by being here, not living under the Taliban in Afghanistan. But that £7 billion figure was bandied about an awful lot. Do you not think the public, taxpayers, have a right to know, and had a right to know over quite a lot of this period, that up to £7 billion of their hard-earned money was going to be spent on this? I think it's absolutely right that people should scrutinise how government money is spent down to the last penny.
Well, you can't if you don't know about it.
But there is a fundamental question about whether or not it's right that we, as a country, should look after those people who risk their own lives to support our armed forces. It's a simple question. Do you believe that we should abandon those who stand with us in conflict?
Well, we did. We did abandon quite a lot. I've still been in touch with a man we identified as Sammy on the show, who worked for British forces and American and German forces at times, and he's been given no help, completely and utterly abandoned by the Brits. And there are many of these people.
In which case, I agree with you that it's appropriate that we look at every case. There will be some people. I gave this information to Defence Secretary, to all the authorities. I've repeatedly, nothing's happened. I'm grateful to you for doing so, because each individual case is is moving, because these are all individuals who risk their lives and their families' lives to help us. So that's why it's right that we do everything and did everything in order to support and to help them. And that's why we did everything in order to ensure that the operation, to make sure that they were taken out of risk and taken to the United Kingdom, was done as effectively as possible. Was it perfect? No. Nothing that any state ever does is. But the critical question is, if people object to the cost, entirely fair enough, then the inference that I draw from that is that they would have been happy for more people to have been put at risk and to have been left at the mercy of the Taliban. That's the straightforward equation.
I'm not sure I agree with that equation, but look, there's lots of other things I want to talk to you about, Lord Gove. So,
but why not? So what is the money being spent on? The money is being spent on bringing people from Afghanistan to the UK.
Well, because there are more people
less money, then fewer people come here.
Because more people have been exposed who wouldn't necessarily have had to come here, and with lots of people who did help us have not been able to come here.
Everyone on the database was someone, or nearly everyone on the database.
No, everyone on the debate.
Someone who was already at risk. So
no, that's not what I've read. You are more privy to this information, but in terms of the reports I've read in many different organisations, and the statement that John Healey gave, that the people on this list were people who had not been vetted. These were people who had applied to come to Britain. They were not necessarily vetted as people who had indeed supported our forces.
But they were then subsequently vetted. That was the whole
the people who have come here,
Yeah, the key question is, how could the sum have been reduced?
Okay, you're saying these people would have had to come here anyway. In which case, if they'd had to come here anyway,
no,
why on earth has it all been covered up for 3 years?
I'm simply saying that you can either object to the cost, which is fair enough, or you can say that, and if you do, you can say that fewer people should have come here, or you can say, actually, we want the maximum number of people to come here, in which case there is inevitably a cost. These are very difficult trade-offs.
Okay.
But for anyone who wants to reconsider any aspect of this policy, and it's right that we do review it, a denial of those trade-offs and a refusal to acknowledge that there is no perfect answer is to choose an option that cannot and did not exist.
But the British people have not been given the option of that because we weren't told about it, and that's the key issue. Can I put you a point that Colin, a caller, just made?
It's not the key issue.
Well, it is the key issue for an awful. You were an elected MP for a long time, Michael Gove. I have a funny feeling that you know the fact that the British public gets to decide what they think the key issues are, and so does our audience. But Colin has just called up and he said,
no, the key issue is whether or not you rescue people from Afghanistan.
But we didn't rescue lots of people who we know were in need.
We left
them behind, and you know that as well as I do.
But do you object to our seeking to rescue people?
No.
Good.
But it depends who they are. Now, Colin, a caller's just made a point. Why move these people here? Why not move them to another safe country in the Middle East?
Because they fought alongside the British Army.
Well, a lot of these people weren't fighting. They were in support roles or translating roles. They were not necessarily fighting. And to be fair, they were fighting for their own country. Well, they were, but then you could argue they were fighting for their own country.
They were our allies. We had a moral obligation to do everything that we could.
All right. OK. Thank you. No, you've been very clear on that. I appreciate that. Let me come. We haven't got much more time. I just want to ask you about one other story. We've seen, inflation has hit 3.6%. We know we're facing this, what now looks like a £40 billion black hole in the public finances. Got autumn mass expectation that we're going to see tax rises from the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. We now know also that almost half of people claiming universal credit, the main working age benefit, are not actually required to look for work in this country. And there are more than 1 million foreign-born people, still foreign nationals, are claiming the benefit as well. Is that something that you are ashamed of as a Tory minister? This has grown under the Tories, or is this something you think is just, well, so be it?
Neither.
What is your thought on it?
I think it is regrettable. I think that we do need fundamental welfare reform, and Sir Mel Stride was looking at exactly how we could make sure that we target money to those who genuinely need it. One of the consequences of the COVID pandemic, of course, was that the welfare system came under tremendous strain, but it also compelled those who followed, including Mel, to look again at how we could improve the welfare system in order to ensure that money was targeted most effectively. It's a pity that the Labour government, in its efforts to reform the welfare system, has fallen foul of its own backbenchers. But I hope that in the weeks and months to come, the scale of the problem that you rightly identify can be addressed by this government.
But I mean, would you respect the government? The Tories were in power from, 2010 to 2024. There were massive efforts to cut down under Ian Duncan Smith's leadership on that particular issue, cutting down the number of people who were claiming welfare, getting people back to work. All went to pot during the pandemic, But the last lockdown finished in 2021, for goodness sake. You were still in office until July 2024, and yet the welfare claimants grew in number massively rather than went back down again. That's on the Tory watch, isn't it? I mean, saying it's regrettable when we're left this multi-billion-pound bill and millions of people not in work, not in training, not doing anything, many claiming sickness benefits, claiming, working tax credits, universal credit while not actually looking for work. That's unsustainable. And it was just as unsustainable a year ago as it is today.
Yes, but it was the case that Mel Stride, who was the welfare secretary under Rishi Sunak, was looking at how you could reform the work capability assessment, which is the key measure, one of the key measures, by which you ensure that people who can work do. And it was the case that the changes you quite rightly point out that Ian Duncan Smith introduced as welfare secretary both reduced the welfare bill and created new incentives for work.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there because time is against us. There's lots of topics we didn't get to because, of course, when we originally arranged to speak to you, we didn't have that story from Afghanistan, but obviously such an important story. I really appreciate your answers on that. Lord Gove, former Conservative government minister, also editor at The Spectator. At 10:50 is the time. I'd love to hear your reaction to that interview. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The first time we've even been given this information, the first time the public's even been told what this breakdown looks like, that 1 in 6 people who are claiming universal credit aren't British. And we are a very, very generous country and people, but it's not viable to do this. It's not sustainable and it's not affordable for us to pay for everybody who comes here on the basis that they're going to contribute and then either stops working or falls on hard times or whatever it might be. People like that, unfortunately, will need to go home.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. I don't think Michael Gove was very happy with that interview. I'm not entirely sure why. But do tell us your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Matthew Lars is still here, former Labour Party advisor. Your face was a picture during that. He kept using the term regrettable, isn't it? Regrettable, but it totally, absolutely stands by 100% what the MOD did once they discovered this leak was the right thing. Full stop, everything.
That's clearly the new word to wipe away all Tory mistakes of 14 years. I don't think it was regrettable. I think both the issue around benefits and the issue around Afghanistan was scandalous, not regrettable. So that, and then
you're not going to make the benefits thing any better. But in terms of this idea that this idea that you either object to the cost or you say you just leave these people in Afghanistan. The truth is we've left loads of people in Afghanistan who are at risk.
And the thing is, the Taliban had the list for 18 months. So was it a panic? Was it an over response?
Well, they said they've had it all along. They'd have known who everyone was anyway, for goodness sake.
And they're trying to kill down debate about it by saying everybody was at risk, which is obviously what they did with the super injunction. When actually, when you look at the list, as you say, a lot of people just applied. They didn't have evidence, so they actually supported the Brits.
It's all very questionable. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. Right now, let's talk to our next guest, Justin Urquhart-Stewart, economist, and you'll know him well as the chairman of Regionally Investment Platform. A very good morning to you, Justin, and apologies for keeping you waiting. We were talking to a peer of the realm. Apologies for that. There was so much to get into. Big speech from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, yesterday. You normally would have covered it on, looking ahead of it yesterday, and then massive big issue today. I mean, she's just such a lame duck, also ran Chancellor. No, that's the truth. No one really cares. And of course, this Afghanistan story has taken over. But she talked about red tape. She's talked about freeing up few more people being able to get a mortgage they probably won't be able to afford, talking about negative narrative around investing in stocks and shares. But, I mean, did we get anything particularly useful out of her that in any way deals with the fact that we've got inflation hitting 3.6%, going up, not down?
Well, you used two perfect words there to sum it up: negative narrative. If you wish to encourage people to actually think, actually, we're damaged, not doomed, don't go around telling us all the things that are wrong the entire time. Tell us actually what is going to be done positively that we can see, which will have an impact. And, the measures we've discussed before, setting up new businesses, actually making sure there are proper incentives for people by way of, like, the enterprise investment scheme, which gives you up to a certain level, 50% sort of guarantee on your money. So it doesn't cost the government anything. It's a guarantee unless it goes wrong. Did we hear anything about that? No. We heard a bit about what about not so much cash ISAs, but why not invest in stocks and shares? Well, that's quite dangerous. I think it's very good. People should have long-term investment. But most people probably think share was someone who's married to Sonny. The actual understanding.
No, but also things that I know people who've been working in the city and they're very sort of free and easy with their money. And I'll say, would you advise me? But bearing in mind, I got up at 4:20 every day for 5.5 years to get my money. You just you basically gambled on the stock market with a few things. I want that money to still be there, and I would rather it didn't make much money than I lose any of it. Most people are very risk averse.
Absolutely, and the way you make money is slowly, over time. Yeah. If you're trying to get some excitement into it, i.e. risk into it, because you can double your money, well, frankly, that's why we have horse racing. That's a completely different issue. We need to be people from day naught, when they're born, the family contributing into a long-term pension scheme, get into tax breaks on it. Average investments across the stock markets will, over time, bear in mind that compounding of dividends is really important, 6 or 7%.
So it builds on it over the year. That's the thing, it's the long term, put a bit away and you'd be amazed how much. Again, a lot of people can't afford to do an awful lot of that. And we know also, talking about businesses and how, we'll talk about red tape on the boot of the neck of businesses. She put a tax on employing people, the National Insurance Employers' Rise. She put that up last autumn. The expectation that may still go up. The new Employment Rights Bill, basically massive burdens on employers. Basically, if someone just has a sniffle or looks at someone the wrong way, basically they're entitled to full pay and a full payoff. I mean, from day one, most employers, we're going the way of France, where basically no one wants to employ anybody because they assume basically the same rights as the person running the company on day one. I mean, she can't talk about red tape being the problem when A, they wanted to stay in the EU where a lot of that red tape comes from, and B, she's just imposed more difficulties on people.
Well, actually, what you've done here, and you're seeing now coming through in those inflation figures, and you mentioned it quite rightly just now in terms of the employment tax. That's what it is. Employment tax comes through, and yes, that's pushed up some overall prices, which is reflected in yesterday's inflation figures.
She won't have worked that out, though, after all those years as an economist. No, but that's the thing. Where did they think she said that? I mean, she said this wasn't this wouldn't affect working people. What, the idea that national insurance, the cost of an employer hiring you, won't affect your pay? It's insane.
Well, and the other issue with that, linking it to pay, is actually we increased the minimum wage. No, you didn't. You don't pay the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Business pays the minimum wage.
Yeah.
And so actually be in a position where actually, again, give people long-term incentives, businesses to have people employed, to make sure they're having their right pension schemes, understanding what's going on. Again, that's creative, that's positive.
Yeah.
Not encouraging people, as they'll say, like the old British adverts, go and tell Sid to go and buy shares.
Those adverts.
It was so nauseating. And of course, bear in mind in those days, still say you can't advertise investments in stocks and shares in terms of actually new issues and things like that. But the government can. And they had an entire campaign of privatisations, and some of which worked very well. Others, well, the main reason I think most of them actually did fail is lack of regulation. The regulations didn't have any teeth. They had a set of...
And she's saying we need to deregulate. Well, we saw what happened there. We had the housing crisis. Anyway, the main thing is we need to know that the Mansion House speech from Rachel Reeves moves the markets less than her bursting into tears at PMQs, and that tells you everything about this Chancellor. Just now, I can't see it was short, but it was sweet, just like those beautiful, beautiful red braces. Economist and the chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform, thank you very much indeed. Lots more calls coming from you. I'd love to hear a reaction to what Michael Gove had to say. It was just regrettable what happened at Lee of those Afghanistan names, but absolutely it was the right thing to do to not just bring all the Afghans here at great expense, but also to cover it up for 3 years. Love to hear your thoughts on that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or your smart speaker watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. If you've missed any of the show so far, particularly my interview with Michael Gove, Lord Gove as he is now, who's a minister in government and did know about, from word go, that there was that super injunction on Afghanistan. You might want to go back and have a listen to that. We'll put it on X as well, but it'll be on my YouTube page. You can find that very easily. Just search for the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Got no excuses. Hit subscribe and you will never miss a thing. Lots more calls coming up in this hour on... I just think this is such an extraordinary story, and the numbers involved are huge, although the numbers seem to differ depending on which news outlet you look at and what is said in court and what was said by the Defence Secretary John Healey in the Commons yesterday. But we're looking at almost 7,000 Afghan nationals being relocated to the UK, already here or still on their way, following a massive data breach by the Ministry of Defence that happened back in 2022, a year after the Kabul evacuation. Even the MOD didn't know about it until a year later, and they've spent the last few years keeping it quiet. Successive governments tried to keep it secret with a super injunction, a complete news blackout. Now, the breach contains the names of 25,000 Afghans who were applying for asylum, soldiers who'd worked with the British Army, their family members, some interpreters, some other support workers, and it's believed as many as 100,000 people in total are impacted. Now, the British government only informed everybody yesterday, 3.5 years after their data was first compromised. Now, the MOD said that relocation costs alone will be around £850 million, but the court heard again and again the figure of £7 billion in total. Now, is that the cost of people being looked after and supported and housed for the rest of their lives and their children? What does that involve? We have yet to be told. But there's been no scrutiny. Why? Well, because we didn't sodding well know about it. Neither did MPs. Only a few people in government and a few lawyers and some newspapers that were banned by law from even telling us there was a super injunction against us being told. Meanwhile, the Taliban claimed that the leaked list of Afghans has been in their position since, a few months after it was actually put out there. And they've been hunting down those people ever since. In related news, it's been revealed that an Ethiopian asylum seeker accused of 3 sexual assaults over 2 days, which sparked ugly anti-migrant protests outside a hotel in Essex, had only arrived in Britain on a small boat 8 days earlier. Say what you like about these boat asylum seekers. They're fast workers, if not in the right area, but extraordinary story. Perhaps they're no longer extraordinary or shocking to many of us. Plus, only 4 out of 10 crimes in London are reported to police because victims simply don't trust that criminals will be charged or convicted. That's according to analysis of Met Police figures. All that, plenty more coming up to be discussed with my guest joining me this morning. I'm delighted to say former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. Morning once again to you.
Good morning again.
We keep explaining this Afghanistan story because it is so complicated.
Absolutely. You
can't really have a view on it until you understand it. So I'm just going to very briefly just go over it for those of you who just sort of getting on top of it. Bearing in mind, this story came out at midday yesterday. We were on air and we were sort of looking at the figures going, what? I mean, 7 billion quid of your and my money, and no one thought we had a right to know about it. Thousands of lives at risk. No, nothing to see here. 2021. Taliban took back over in Afghanistan. 2022, there was this data leak. The MOD didn't know about it. Some idiot, the MOD, writing an email to 100 people, accidentally just put, almost 19,000 people's names and info into that email. They didn't even know there had been that data leak until over a year later in 2023. They found out because someone put some of the info on Facebook, basically threatened to put more of it out to the Taliban. Initially, there was what's called a D notice, and this is basically for national security, you can't report it. I think we'll all understand that, where you're trying to save people's lives. And then a super injunction was opposed by the court. And that means not just that we're not allowed to know the details of the data breach, we're not even allowed to know that there has been an injunction. We're not even allowed to know that the injunction even exists. So I think it was the Mail and the Times were both pushing this and trying to get it overturned. And yesterday it was overturned after 23 months, so almost 2 years, that super injunction was lifted. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, made a statement in the House of Commons talking about why this had happened. He's apologised on behalf of the British government. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, as was at the time, has been on the airwaves and in newspapers defending it. We've just spoken to Michael Gove, who was a senior figure in that government. He was aware of the super injunction. He defends it. There was a cover-up of the data leak. There was a cover-up of the bid to get people back to this country. The huge cost, thousands of people brought into this country that we weren't told about, huge costs it involved, many people still left behind. The £7 billion figure, extraordinary. £1 billion looks like it might be spent on legal costs for people who are suing, who were on that list, who were put at risk. The story is exploding. People are very angry, understandably. But Matthew Lars, I mean, it's difficult to sort of narrow down which bit of this is the worst bit, isn't it?
Absolutely. Maybe we'll only be able to make that judgment when more facts emerge, because although, you know, as you said, it's a complicated story, I think it's going to get more complicated yet when we find out who did what when and exactly what the final figure will be.
And that's the thing. I mean, the court heard the figure £7 billion repeatedly. It was in court constantly, OK? And now they're saying, no, it's going to be up to maybe 850 million. And then there'll be £1 billion on these court costs. Well, you know, where's the £7 billion from then? Now, they didn't bring everyone over here, but are they talking about the potential of, like, if you bring someone over here, I mean, some of these people might speak English, some not, maybe don't have skills they can translate here, they've got a family, they've got 6 kids. I mean, a lot of people, you know, Afghanistan families are very, very large. You know, we're supporting them in a council house or, again, 1 in 10 numbers, you know, people on the homeless list, eligible. They won't have family members here they can stay with, so eligible for housing that would otherwise have gone to British people. There is a reality there that the High Court judge and the government ministers and the people who work at the MOD don't deal with that reality because they're not living in that world where they are competing for these scarce resources with people like these Afghan arrivals. All these different costs, like it could be over many years. And British people have never been asked if we're happy to do that, if it was the right thing to do. There's been no scrutiny by MPs, not even by the sort of, you know, Joint Intelligence Committee. There are committees in the Commons where there are senior figures on those committees who are bound to secrecy. They don't discuss it, but they provide some scrutiny, at least, of government action. And there's been none of that.
Absolutely nobody was allowed to scrutinise it at all. Nobody was allowed to know about it by the very nature of the super injunction. I think the £7 billion figure would have come from if everybody on the list had come. And I think one of the things that John Healey, the Labour Defence Secretary, would say is that they have actually, you know, effectively gone through the list, worked out who was most at risk on the list, and therefore said that a lot of people on that list can't come.
So
I don't quite know
why
we're not going to pay for that. Quite why it was left for 2 years until Labour came in to do that, I don't understand.
No, and that's the thing, because I mean, Michael Gove earlier on, Lord Gove said it was vitally important. It was about safety. The whole thing is regrettable, but he said yes, it was right. There was a blackout, and I do accept that there should be a blackout for a few months, but they didn't contact everyone on the list. They didn't get everybody out. The idea that you need a news blackout for all those years is frankly tosh.
And the idea the Taliban didn't have the list is absolute tosh. As the Taliban's been telling us this morning, they had it all along.
Also,
they're laughing all the way.
Also, by the way, everyone knows everyone in these sort of towns and villages. I mean, come on. The idea that, you know, someone who's working with the British, the idea that people wouldn't know that,
it wasn't
that their name. I mean, I'm sorry, this is a load of nonsense. A lot of these people were already at risk. But I mean, Michael Gove basically saying is absolutely the right thing to do. And he's saying, look, if you object to the cost, you object to the billions, whatever it's going to end up being, but realistically, best part of $2 billion in your best case scenario, okay? If it's going to end up costing that, like, if you object to that, are you saying that those people shouldn't have been brought here? So it's one or the other. He says it's either the cost, you can either spend that money, or you could just say, no, we're quite happy for people who help the British forces, British, you know, Afghanistan soldiers to be left there.
Well, I think it's exactly what you just said, which is lots of people in Afghanistan help British forces. Lots of people in Afghanistan know who they are because they're in their communities. And so what he's basically saying is, if you don't agree to a total blank check, you want these people to be die basically. Yeah. And that's an extraordinarily reductive argument, because clearly not every single person who ever did anything, who ever, you know, peeled a potato for the British forces is ever going to be allowed into Britain. And it's this blank check argument. We saw it over COVID, isn't it?
And if that were the case, then, you know, we would have brought more people over than we did anyway, because lots of people were left. But also this idea they were fighting for us. No, they weren't. These were Afghanistan people in lots of cases who were in Afghanistan fighting for their own country. I'm not entirely sure. And it's like, again, with that Ukraine, we had, you know, women and children in, and people have been very welcoming of that, for that to come to safety, although many have now gone home, because, you know, it's not been the sort of total war that many had thought it was, and it was in the early months. But But what are we saying? So if Russia ends up, winning more territory in Ukraine, are we just going to say, well, every Ukrainian gets to come here? I mean, that's not going to fly with most people. And as one of our callers pointed out earlier, do these people all have to come here? Or I mean, we know a lot of people making their way to Pakistan, and Pakistanis might say, well, we don't want these people. But I mean, the reality is, if Ireland was invaded, we'd have the Irish people here. If that is the reality. It's neighbouring countries that often bear the brunt.
Well, I think one thing is the Taliban, I think, probably didn't do anything with the list that they had, because they can do a screen capture off Facebook. Because of course, what it's doing is it's getting rid of the people who might stand up to the Taliban, who would be their opponents, pushing them out of the country. Yeah. So in fact, they're laughing.
Yeah, I have to say, none of it adds up. And again, I think we've been lied to too many times by this government, the last government, all governments. We know that actually so much of these things tends to be about covering backsides, covering reputations, and less about doing the right thing. I simply don't trust a lot of the explanations here.
Not one head has rolled, including the original person who sent the email, the people who you kind of didn't put checks and balances in place to stop that, etc. We're just told that the person who sent the email is now no longer dealing with Afghanistan.
He's just putting other people's lives at risk. I mean, but genuinely, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is a very popular figure, in the last government, really, really popular with Tory members and the public at large. Very, very highly respected Defence Secretary. But he was on the radio this morning, and he's basically saying, it was the right thing to do. He stands by it, and absolutely, he's defending this person still working in the MOD. But he said, he didn't apply for the super injunction. So who did?
Who knew what when? Yeah. And what we're having this morning is every former Tory minister putting rushing onto the airwaves or into print to say, "Not me, Gov." Yeah. Well, then who was it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, so much more I want to talk about. Let's talk about inflation at 3.6%. For an awful lot of people, again, it's the economy, stupid. That's the issue in elections. Immigration, a massive issue, and culture wars, NHS, and all of that. And we get to all those topics most days. But inflation, the experts, they get it wrong every time. But they predicted it to be less, or stay around the 3.4% it was last month. But for June, it hit 3.6%. And this is the reality: is that since 2020, 2021, we have seen prices go up by 25%. They've gone up. Things are a quarter more expensive than they used to be, and they're still going up. So even though we don't have 11% inflation anymore, we've still got 3.6%. It's going in the wrong direction. The target of the Bank of England is 2%. This means they're unlikely to sort of speed up cutting those interest rates and and at the same time, we're facing, let's face it, massive tax rises under the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Whatever she says about trying to boost growth and business, it's going to be tax rises because this government refuses to cut anything.
Well, you'll also have the issue of public sector pay awards. We've seen with the resident doctors, I mustn't call them junior doctors, the resident doctors just in the last few days. Any increase in inflation gives fuel to the mill, grist to the mill for the unions who are pushing for higher pay rises.
Where do you stand on that? Wes Streeting has said it's outrageous, it's unconscionable. But didn't he walk into that go, yeah, here you go, here's your 22% last summer?
I think something had to be done in terms of they had fallen too far behind, but I think it's absolutely right to hold the line now. We've seen public support. I wonder if actually that they're going to realise that the time is running out on their demands.
Only a third of all resident doctors actually voted for this. What do you make of the hypocrisy of the Labour government saying, oh, you only had 55% of people who were members of the BMA who voted for this. It was 90% yes, but only 55% voters, only just over half. When the government is currently bringing in a law, and it's in the House of Lords at the moment under Angela Rayner, which is an employment rights bill, which will scrap that Tory law, which basically said if you're going to have a vote to go on strike, you're going to have at least 50% of members taking part in the vote. That's your bare minimum. And they're going to scrap that.
I think it's very hard for politicians to impose a minimum turnout on an election because, as we've seen, Labour won with a third of the vote from 60%
there was a turnout of over 50%.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's not the thing that worries me most about.
They were elected fair and square
in the employment rights bill. I'm glad that some of the more outrage edges have been toned down.
Such as?
Well, the right to completely switch off has gone. There are other things that the Treasury have managed to.
What about people having rights from day one? I mean, they're now talking. There's people campaigning, you know, that, you know, if your child is sick, you know, you're grieving for a miscarriage, you're grieving for a relative. I mean, let's just pay everyone every single day if they stub their toenail.
I think you've got to get the balance right, and I hope that the Employment Rights Act will do that. There are things like, I think it's right that people who've had a miscarriage are given, you know, time off, for instance, but obviously if you've got a stub toe, no. And therefore, you know, you have to get the balance between the employer and the employee, right? And especially in a world of work, it's changed with more people working from home, etc. You need to get that right.
Well, again, I think it's a balance, but again, the government giving a lot of rights to people which they don't end up paying for. The government doesn't pay for it, it's the employer that pays for it, and then saying get rid of... Last night we had Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, talking about how, you know, red tape is the boot on the neck of businesses. Yeah, and she's adding more employment rights. And again, I think Labour has this really, really strange idea that employers are bad, evil people, like landlords, bad, evil people, and people who rent are all wonderful, lovely souls, and every employee is a victim of their evil boss. They're in the sort of dark, satanic mills, you know, people being sort of whipped, you know. I mean, that's not the relationship most people have with their bosses.
I think there's a bit of that tied into sort of Labour DNA, because actually, literally, the party came out of traditional Victorian industry, like the cotton mills where I'm from in Lancashire. But no, I think...
came from the cotton mills?
Absolutely, you know, and the coal mines.
No, I'm not going to...
He's
in a little basket in a cotton mill.
Not quite. My dad did leave school at 14 to be a docker, but what I mean is that that is kind of a bit hardwired into how Labour thinks. I think it's right that the Employment Rights Bill comes in, but it's got to realise that we're not in the grad grind era of mill owners. We're in a world where a lot of people work in small and medium-sized enterprises, which is the lifeblood of the economy. I think you can't overburden them.
I think we need to give employers more rights. I think it's really bizarre that most employees now, particularly young people, seem to think that they can dictate where they work, how long they work, and what they do, and how they're spoken to and everything in an office. If you don't like it, go and get another job. And by the way, you're not going on the dole. But apparently they are. What do you make of these figures? Almost half of people claiming universal credit, which is the main working age benefit, are not required to look for work. So we've got 7.9 million people. So you've got basically 8 million people in this country are claiming universal credit. Only 2.2 million of those are actually in work. So the majority of them are either not required to look for work, that's 3.5 million, and then 1.5 million roughly are saying they're searching for work, and another 500,000 are preparing for work. I mean, this is an absolute nonsense. If you want a job, there are jobs. Now, there's a difference between someone like they've left a particular industry and they're looking for something similar, or they're retraining. I get that. That's not the case. There are a lot of people who are just going, well, I'm waiting for the right job. Yeah, well, I'm waiting for the right taxes that mean I don't pay for you while you're looking for a job. You can look for a job while you've already got a job. Go and do whatever you need to do. If I had to clean toilets, sweep the streets, put food on the table for my family, I would do that, and I would not be embarrassed or ashamed, and no one should, from doing honest hard work. But the idea that you could just go on benefits and not even be required to look for work. They're on universal credit. Why are they not looking for work?
So I think one of the issues with universal credit, which wrapped loads of different benefits together into one benefit, and you've got different elements of it depending on your circumstances, means that it's much harder to actually see what's going on because everybody's on universal credit. Yeah. So wrapped up in those figures, the 1.6 million, what we used to just say were on the dole. They're people who are claiming the unemployment benefit part of universal credit, but required to look for work as they have been historically. The rest includes people who have got severe disabilities, might not be able to work, and a lot of people who have them.
Or a food intolerance, we've learned this week.
Look, and we've seen, and you put it to Michael Gove, we've seen a doubling of people between the pandemic, which ended now, 4 years ago. Between the ending of the pandemic and now, we've seen a doubling of people who are claiming basically sickness benefits, and most of that is young people, and most of that is for mental health conditions. It's not good for the economy, and it's not good for those people.
Your party won't actually stand up to that. I mean, the Tories allowed it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The Tories allowed it to happen. My party, the pressure, they got into a mess on it. It's not dead. It's not even in the deep freeze. There is a review going on under one of the ministers, Stephen Timms, and I hope it comes back with a set of proposals that can get more support, but realise that this is unsustainable, not just for the economy and the taxpayer, but for the people
you guys
on it.
Are not going to get to grips with this. Is going to be another one of the big crises. And again, people only put up with their taxes going up so much. There's an explanation by why we are seeing such low approval figures for this government. Just finally, I want to talk about MasterChef. We talked about this so much this week. So MasterChef star John Turode sacked. over this comment he made in either 2018 or 2019. No one can actually remember when. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing anyway. A comment that he made using apparently an unacceptable racial slur, not used maliciously, not as a term of abuse, but used it, said it. I've read that, you know, may have been in a song or something. So again, he could have been singing, you know, Gold Digger, you know, and sang the next lyric, you know, she ain't dating any. Now, this is madness, okay? This is absolutely crazy. If someone is walking around being racially abusive to people, absolutely out on your ear. First warning, second warning, out, end of, nothing to discuss. No one's accusing him of that. Now, by all accounts, we've heard that he was frankly pretty difficult to work with. Well, aren't a lot of these big stars. But, you know, Greg Wallace, allegations against him, lots of them, the touching ones have actually been, you know, thrown out, but inappropriate, showing his genitals to people. I mean, just, you know, general just misbehaviour. A lot of it a long time ago. And again, this report, you don't get all the details. A lot of things happening a long time ago, and his behaviour's massively changed since 2018, we are told. And yet, he's lost his job. Now John Turode as well. Is this the BBC doing the right thing, or is this the BBC basically operating a scorched earth policy? Get rid of all of them. Let's protect the boys at the top of the BBC, boys and girls at the top of the BBC, and throw everyone else under the bus.
I think they wanted to relaunch the programme, and therefore, you know, you had to have an excuse to get rid of him. And it seems to me, of John Turode, and it seems to me that they've sort of dug out this. I mean, it's effectively the bants police, you know, the sort of banter police, which is one of the things that people worried about. I think that has been toned down in the Employment Rights Bill. That, you know, pub staff are going to have to overhear banter.
I love you're laughing. This is your law.
Well, I'm glad that has gone. I have one simple solution for MasterChef: bring back Lloyd Grossman. Who was the original presenter of MasterChef in the 80s and early 90s.
That's the solution.
Bring back Lloyd Grossman.
Is he still?
No, he's very much there.
I don't know. I was just thinking in my head. I'm thinking in my head.
He was the advisor to the government on meals and things.
Lloyd, there's a job for you apparently, but you know you need to start spelling your name right. Anyway, Matthew Larson, thank you very much. Lots of calls coming in. I want to hear from you on any of the topics you want to talk about. If you want to talk about John Turode, feel free. Or any other topic, including that universal credit. But I'm mostly interested in your thoughts on this extraordinary Afghan cover-up scandal. Which bit of it, because there's a lot of aspects to it, are you most angry about? Or do you agree with Michael Gove and Ben Wallace and everyone else saying they think they did exactly the right thing, even down to the super injunction and the billions of pounds of your and my money that's going to be spent on this? I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
The first time we've even been given this information, the first time the public's even been told what this breakdown looks like, that 1 in 6 people who are claiming universal credit aren't British. And And we are a very, very generous country and people, but it's not viable to do this. It's not sustainable, and it's not affordable for us to pay for everybody who comes here on the basis that they're going to contribute and then either stops working or falls on hard times or whatever it might be. People like that, unfortunately, will need to go home.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 11:27. Matthew Lars is still with us. He's a former Labour Party advisor. But all I like about this is like when we have you're standing in for the lovely Claire Pearson. Both of you quite happy to criticise your own lot because that's what we like. People who are open and honest about when everyone messes up. Well, it turns out, according to Michael Gove, we spoke to earlier, who's a senior cabinet minister throughout the last Conservative government, and certainly was aware. He says from word go that super injunction on the Afghanistan scandal, I think most people would regard it as. He thinks it was regrettable that that they all happened, but fundamentally he completely supports what happened. The super injunction, the complete news blackout, and the costs of bringing people to this country. Love to know your thoughts. So 344 499 1000 is the number to call. Louise has called that number. She's in Kent. Louise, what do you make of it?
Well, I think if you step right back, I think the saddest thing about all of this is it just exposes the complete fiasco over the withdrawal from Afghanistan in the first place.
Yeah.
Put in place by Trump's original policy, enacted terribly by Biden.
Yep.
And if there hadn't have been that dreadful rush to get everybody out and all the risks, which meant that people who probably weren't, covered by helping Britain tried to get out, and so therefore applied things which they shouldn't have done, followed up by the civil service, who would have had a list of those at risk but chose not to choose the right people. This would never have happened.
Yep.
This is what's so horrible about the whole thing.
Yeah, a plague on all their houses. I mean, I can remember sitting here, covering it every single morning, speaking to the Defence Secretary and Defence Ministers and about the absolute abject chaos. But actually, a lot of the criticism at the time was about the Foreign Office. They didn't predict the Taliban were going to reach Kabul within a week, which they then did. They thought it would be months. I mean, they're absolute abject incompetence in terms of the way they actually even, people working from home at the Foreign Office. Remember, the Foreign Secretary was away. And his permanent secretary were both away on holiday at the same time. But actually at the time, a lot of the praise that was going was to the Ministry of Defence and the military leaders and the men and women on the ground, that actually they did a really good job considering what they were dumped with. But obviously it's not worked out quite as well as we thought.
No, and I think it's very sad. Can I just make a comment about the universal credit?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. Now, I lost my career due to mental health, which they've now realised was completely wrong 40 years ago. And for me, the worst thing of all was being told at the age of 25 it was unlikely I would never work again. Wow. And I fought for years to get back. Eventually, I did get back as a bag packer because that's all the skills I had at a local supermarket. And I then went back, I did that, and then I got till trained once I got the confidence.
Yeah.
Then I worked as a peer lead in a mental health trust, and slowly I pulled my way back.
But you were basically written off.
I was.
And that's my fear.
And it was horrible. It was the worst. It destroyed me.
Yeah.
And all these youngsters now going for diagnoses, they've got no idea. The trouble is, employers do not want people with mental health issues.
No.
So they are setting themselves up for failure and disaster, and they'll get to my age and they'll think, what the hell have I done?
Oh, Louise, I couldn't agree with you more. That's the thing. And again, I think a lot of this is parents. Parents have got to get on top of this stuff as well and stop, doing the old cotton wool thing and helping their children from a young age to be more resilient and a lot of people have gone through a lot of bad stuff, but the scale of that in this country is just not believable anymore. Louise, great call on both counts. Thank you so much. Let's go to Stephen in Manchester. Stephen, what do you make of the whole Afghan scandal?
Right. Well, I want to make a generic point about prosecuting foreign wars, including the Afghan war. There are three things that this country actually garners or gets from being involved in these wars. Number one, huge cost that suppresses the nation's progress forward, such as is happening with Ukraine at the moment. Number two, if British troops are involved, we get obviously the loss of British lives. And number three, and it's inexorably the case, we get grand-scale, ongoing immigration. There is nothing that the prosecution of these foreign wars gives us that is purposeful.
Well, hold on a minute. Okay, I mean, I don't think we actually followed through as well. Perhaps we should have on Afghanistan, or perhaps a different kind of war. At the end of the day, we were supporting our ally, as were most other democratic countries in the world when it comes to Afghanistan. Different for Iraq, our ally America, after they were attacked, the most egregious terror attack from from Al Qaeda, who were being basically, allowed to live freely and operate and train freely by the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Taliban wouldn't give them up. The Taliban had to be taken out of commission. I mean, absolute abject failure in terms of that long term. But
absolute complete failure.
Well, what should we have done? Just left them there? No problem. Leave them there.
I'm coming from the point that we should not have been involved in the first place.
I know, I disagree with you. I think we absolutely should have been involved. Are you saying that it's not our problem if our ally, America, gets bombed by a terrorist organisation who's given safe haven by a government in Afghanistan? Not our problem?
I'm saying we haven't got the bandwidth. We are dying as a nation demographically.
That's a different matter there. What do you make of the actual cover-up, the leak and then the cover-up?
One informs the other, but yeah, what do I make of it? It was a complete debacle, and the British public did have a right to know. Because
even if that would have put lives at risk, which is what Michael Gove and Ben Wallace are suggesting?
I'm deeply suspicious of the vetting anyway. Who is amongst us again? I mean, we've now, as a nation, just given up on the borders, and we're looking at the end of this country within my grandchildren's lifetime. Within the next 50 years, we will be demographically over.
Yeah, oh no, again, and the fact that anyone who talks about this is sort of condemned as sort of being bigoted in some way, these are major, major changes to our country. And we weren't asked, we weren't consulted, and to the extent that we have been, we've said no thank you, and we've been ignored. I agree with you on your concerns there. I disagree with you on Afghanistan, but so welcome your comments, and everyone's welcome to come and have their say as well. 11:34 is the time. We're going to take a very quick break, then we're going to be talking to former Defence Attaché for the UK in Kabul. That's Colonel Simon Diggins. Stay tuned for that to see what he thinks. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Just some breaking news, very, very important stuff. Emma Watson, Harry Potter star, who's completely and utterly been appalling to J.K. Rowling, our great hero. She's just been banned from driving for 6 months for, she already had 3 previous offences and it was whatever her latest offence was. So that, well, at least she'll be out and about a little less. That's probably a good thing for everyone, isn't it? But anyway, there you are. I'm sure you can find, we'll give you a chance, friends, to drive you, darling. Anyway, let's get to more important stuff. Let's talk more about where we are this absurd Afghanistan situation. Absurd, dangerous, very expensive, outrageous. I mean, you name it, every single word applies. Let's talk to Colonel Simon Diggins. He was the former British Defence Attaché in Kabul and joins us now. Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
Julia, good morning.
Where do we even start? We've gone through again and again for people to explain. I mean, as much as we can understand, because so many different numbers in terms of the number of Afghans involved, and indeed the huge cost to the British government, and who knew what when. Lots of different versions of events. But I mean, what do you make of this whole affair? Which is the worst bit of it, and can you justify any of it?
Very hard to know where the worst bit of it is. It's like an onion, isn't it? You peel one layer away, then something else appears from behind it, whether it be the cost of it, whether it be the extent of the super injunction, all the way through to the actual numbers themselves. I think you have to take it right way back to what happened between 2014 and 2021. After 2014, we stopped combat operations, and we got into this phase where we were conducting a whole series of support operations with the Afghan forces. It was exactly the right thing to do, trying to build up their capacity to take on the Taliban itself. But that started to go wrong. It started to go wrong when President Trump was in office the first time round and said, really deal with the Taliban. And then that was taken forward by Joe Biden. At that point, the extent of our liability for support and protection of the people we've been working with should have been clear, and we should have known what was going on. We absolutely didn't. If you look what happened in August 21, where we had Op Pitting, the evacuation, the original plan was for us to evacuate about 3,000 people. We ended up evacuating some 15,000, and that was only a portion of those for whom we had been working with. And the reality of life is, whatever their name, whether they were under the Afghan Ministry of Interior, Afghan National Forces, whatever the title was, the truth was they were paid, they were mentored, they were trained by us. Effectively, they were, if you like, local auxiliary forces. Here's
the thing. I think there's a big difference between someone's working as a translator for British forces while they're out there, and they are therefore at risk for, basically, working with the enemy, according to the Taliban. But Afghan men and women, I'm assuming mostly men, training and operating in the Afghan army, as much as I would be concerned about anyone's future, I'm more concerned, by the way, about the women and girls' future under the Taliban currently in Afghanistan. I'm not entirely sure why we have a duty of care to bring a lot of those people over to the UK, because it was, with all due respect, they're paid, it was their choice, they were doing a job. They were doing a job not for us, they were doing a job for their country.
Well, what they were doing, they're continuing what we've been trying to do, which was actually to maintain that we keep the Taliban out. We'd chosen we'd stopped doing it directly, we're now doing it indirectly, using those. But the reality was they were effectively being trained and organised by us.
So what?
If I may, Julie, if I may. But the other thing that was going on is we knew very clearly, and this is the whole point about the timing issue, we knew from whenever they were captured by the Taliban, they were being murdered. And there is some great grim footage of Afghan commander units trained and mentored by us, handed over to the Taliban, who then murdered, and the Taliban filmed it. And I think that was the point where we realised, actually, we couldn't just leave them. But that must have been clear to us from about April 21. My real beef is, first, one, we didn't seem to have any idea what the scale of this was. So every organisation, whether it be our special forces, MI6, the Foreign Office, whoever, were organising these separate groups of people under the same rubric, trained, paid for, mentored by us. So creating a huge liability, we didn't see any idea of it. And then from April 21 onwards, it was very clear that the Afghan government was going to struggle to survive. But there was no planning done at that point to get them out. So we've ended up with this kind of crisis. And I understand that the distinctions have been made, but the reality lies, yes, directly employed by us, through locally employed civilians, the Afghan interpreters, and other individuals.
Oh, just cut off and frozen, and hopefully we can get that line back, because it's interesting to go back over that background. That actually this goes back further. Have we got Simon back? Line's just dropped. So many tech problems over the last few days. Very, very frustrating. And Matthew Larson's still with me. I mean, that's very interesting that, this idea that we have a duty of care to all of them. Now, I've always been very strong in the view that we have this duty of care to, the interpreters, the people like that. But the idea that everyone who worked in the Afghanistan army while we were there was at risk and we have a duty of care, I struggle with that.
Well, if we have a duty of care, we should still be there. I mean, we shouldn't have pulled out in the absolutely chaotic and frankly disgraceful way that we did. Now, clearly, we couldn't stay without the Americans, and the Americans were determined to get out. Trump and Biden both pursued that, as we've heard. But we have to be realistic about this. We cannot have the entire Afghan army of the entire 20-year period that we were there for.
So where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? And that's the issue. And I'm glad the government seems to have drawn the line quite tightly now on this list, but we can't just use it as an excuse.
Well, indeed. OK, Simon Diggins, we've got him back, former Defence Attaché to the UK in Kabul. Thank you. I'm so glad we got you back on the line. So, look, you're saying this goes back a long way. When we got to the point, we got a data leak, 19,000 almost names are released in February 2022. The MOD didn't find out about it until 2023. Were they right to issue that super injunction? Because we understand there was a D notice, which basically, for national security reasons, people can't publish. But were they right to get a super injunction, which, by the way, the former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace seems, I didn't apply for it. I don't know why that was imposed, but it was in place from August 2023, effectively, all the way until yesterday. Can that be justified on not just whether?
I think what can be justified is the initial super injunction, because clearly there was a crisis. They need to sort it out. There are national security implications. There are people for whom we have a degree of responsibility. I listened to your correspondent arguing whether we had a full responsibility or not, but I would argue there was responsibility. So I think there was a justification for the super injunction. At the point where it looked like something really major needed to happen, there are ways of communicating where you can maintain a degree of public scrutiny. It's very interesting, for example, that the Commons Intelligence Committee, who do have access to classified material, were not made aware of this. So there are ways in which the democratic processes, Privy Council rules, where these democratic processes could have been maintained, a degree of supervision, a degree of scrutiny could have been maintained, as well as looking after the interests
and that's the thing. There's one thing putting on the front page of the Times newspaper or having a secret court hearing, and there's another thing. There are senior figures, former senior figures in government who make up some of these committees, senior figures who can provide some independent-ish scrutiny, not the same scrutiny as you're going to get from newspapers and others. And again, I accept that there would be a need, once you've had that massive mess up and you find out about this data breach, that you want to have some secrecy for a few months. I don't know how one could justify it for all these years. Do you think a lot of the length of time of the super injunction is more about reputation for the government? And there had been previous leaks, and Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, says he takes responsibility. But the reality is the Defence Secretary is not responsible for someone sending an email and getting information in. I mean, he's not done it directly. He's not ordered someone to do it, or he can't be responsible for every email someone sends. But actually, is this more about protecting reputations over the last couple of years rather than actually a national security issue?
I think it's also about not having the processes in place to cope with the numbers concerned. I think that was also part of it from there. I mean, I've heard what Sir Ben Wallace has said, and I've got a lot of time for him personally. I think what we need from people like Sir Ben Wallace now is some complete honesty and transparency. What was the decision-making processes they made? Why do they make them? And let's understand those things properly. I know there's also a move ahead to try and identify the individual concerned. I think that's I'm sure he's been identified. I think is fine. And whatever has happened to him has happened to him. But I want to understand.
Well, he still works at the MOD.
Well, he may well do, but as I said, it may be that's I think there are disciplinary processes in place. I think the danger is we go after a scapegoat and actually miss the systemic issues. And for me, this is a systemic failure.
And we know that this wasn't a one-off data leak. I mean, we've had people reading documents and leaving them at bus stops, and I mean, goodness knows what. There's an abject failure by an awful lot of civil servant staff, certainly in terms of keeping these sort of national secrets. The big worry a lot of people have is. What other super injunctions has the government got? Because interestingly, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, when asked about this, said, "Well, I'm not aware of any. I've not been," we said, read into. But the reality is, if there were super injunctions, he wouldn't be allowed legally to tell us.
No, I mean, I think the whole business about the super injunction needs a complete review. In the past, it's been used to hide celebrity gossip, political gossip. It has a kind of civil affairs type element to it. But to be used like this as a kind of blanket suppression of information, to not allow transparency, the kind of the look at that you say either it comes from the press or it comes from senior figures who can look at something with scrutiny, I think is wrong. There's always a balance to be taken between national security and if you like, the demands, the imperatives of democracy. And there's always a balance to be judged. But by using a very blunt instrument like the super injunction, that balance has been lost. And we now end up in the situation we're in, where we've got a major scandal on our hands. And you rightly highlighted, Julia, and I totally support you, the role of the sad fate of the women of Afghanistan. One of the real failures of the system was that the Home Office was so devoted to trying to make this system work that the scheme which existed to try and bring civil actors, judges, advocates, journalists, even women who'd been halfway through their medical studies who had to stop that was all stopped. That scheme basically died.
But isn't there an issue here? And we want, wouldn't it be great to save every single woman in Afghanistan or every single person? But isn't there an element where, all the people who would have stood up or who could possibly in the future stand up to the Taliban, who could actually fight for a better life in Afghanistan, we bring them all here or bring them all to America, and I'm sure lots have gone to America as well, that, there's no one left to stand up to the government. Shouldn't these people, to a certain extent, stay and fight for their country? I'd like to think I'd do that for my country.
I think we all could hope to do that, but you look at the history of, say, resistance movements in Europe during the Second World War. I mean, some fought, some just cut their head down. But the whole point was the scheme. This is called the ACRS scheme. Was around civil actors. Some 20,000 option places were there. We've used some 12,500. There are still thousands of people out there who believed in what we were offering them. And I know people are very critical about what happened in Afghanistan, but they believed in what we were offering them. They went along with us, and we left. I think wrongly we left, but we did leave, and they have now been let down. And so, for me, there are so many victims of this failure, but one of the ones I would highlight, and you picked up as well, are individuals like that who could have contributed.
Just finally, talking about the money, there's £7 billion total cost was used in court repeatedly. We're now told it's going to be under £1 billion, 800 odd million. Just throw around numbers like that. It's only money after all. And then another billion possibly in legal action. People, some of whom are still in Afghanistan, haven't got here, whose names were leaked. I mean, this money's just thrown around. Been no public scrutiny of this cost, and of course, a lot of people are saying they're unhappy about the fact that a lot of these people have arrived in this country, and yes, they may well have been vetted, probably better than the men who are getting off the boats. And Afghanistan is among one of the main groups of people getting off those dinghies in the Channel. But there is also a concern about who are these people, and are these people we want in this country? They may be at risk for the Taliban. Doesn't necessarily mean they're not necessarily a risk to people here.
No, and that's those are legitimate concerns. And again, it's a question of where is our responsibility as a country?
Yeah.
And I think there's no easy answer, and that's on the individual basis. And I think, to be fair, that's one of the reasons why this took a bit of time, is the Home Office was trying to understand who those individuals were. But I said, go right back to the beginning when we were talking. One of the real challenges was we didn't really know who it was that we were training, supporting, and mentoring.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem in the first place. Colonel Simon Diggins, great to hear your thoughts. Former Defence Attaché, former military man himself, Colonel Diggins. Thank you very much indeed. 11:50 is the time. Up next, we'll be talking about another story related in some ways. This an Ethiopian asylum seeker who, within 8 days of arriving here in the UK, managed to commit 3 sexual assaults that he's been accused of, certainly in court, and is going to court. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk. Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:53 is the time. I'm going to come back to Matthew Larser after the 12 hour. We're going to go to PMQs as well. It's the last PMQs before the summer recess because, you know, MPs basically get school summer holidays, unlike the rest of us. I managed to take a few myself, but even I don't get MPs holidays, good Lord. But I promise I will come back to you, Matthew Larser. But let's go to our next guest and talk about just the latest asylum seeker story that just blows everyone's minds. Chris Phillips joins us. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. He's also the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Very, very good morning to you, Chris.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you. Oh, you're very chirpy and happy today. Thank you. Oh, goodness me. Thank you.
Shining outside,
yeah, well, is it? Oh, God, no, outside my window, it's not. This is just the latest story. I mean, it just does blow, I think, a lot of people's minds. Now, OK, someone has been charged. They've not been convicted, and we have to bear that in mind. But there's reports of an Ethiopian asylum seeker in Essex. He has been charged with 3 sexual assaults that are alleged to have taken place in the space of just 2 days. But within a week of arriving in the UK on one of the Channel dinghies. Now, there have been angry protests at the Migrant hotel where the local asylum seekers are being housed by local people who are unhappy about the allegations. But someone being accused of committing 3 sexual assaults in just 2 days, within days of arriving here. I mean, this is in Colchester. I mean, it does kind of blow your mind that the people who may or may not be arriving on our shores.
Yeah, and this is one more of those cases. There have been many, and there will be many in the future. The simple fact is these people are unregulated. We don't know who they are. Most times they're throwing their identification away anyway. We don't know what they've got up to in their own country. Of course, it's very difficult. It seems far too difficult to deal with them when they're in the UK. They you know, this is not someone that we want in the UK, and he needs to go back. Yeah,
again, we have to be careful. I'm not using his name. We have to be careful because he appeared at Colchester Magistrates Court. I was saying it's actually this all happened alleged in Epping, and he was in the Bell Hotel in Epping, where 100 asylum seekers are being housed by the Home Office. There was a demonstration. There was a counter demonstration from the Refugees Welcome people. It all went off. Everyone, you know, is always accusing any local person upset about, you know, whether or not it was this man or not, but a girl being sexually assaulted, a couple of girls being sexually assaulted, that you know, and that they must be far right and bigots if they're saying maybe it's not a good idea for a load of people from another country where they don't have the same views towards women and girls as we do here, being in this country, having arrived illegally. I mean, you know, that's not the most outrageous view, is it?
No, it's not, and it's a view shared right across Europe, actually. And we've seen in Spain, in Belfast, or Northern Ireland, anyway. You know, this leading to really serious problems. We're in the middle of the summer heat wave. You know, riots happen in these times of year, and these things can spark something off, as we saw in Southport. So I think the government will be watching this very closely. The government by now should be aware that the country is cheesed off with this.
Do you think?
And yeah, I mean, it's quite incredible that over the last 15 years, they've not been able to. A number of governments have not been able to deal with this problem.
Well, again, it just keeps on going, doesn't it? And that's the issue, failure to deal with this. But again, a failure to deal with crime generally, regardless of who it is. But again, we've got enough of our own wrong uns. We don't need to bring in any others. But an amazing stat, and you were a Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, latest stat showing that only 4 out of 10 crimes that are committed in London are actually ever reported by the victims. Basically, unless you've got insurance, like you're claiming, I had my handbag stolen in June last year, you've got insurance, so it's worth making the complaint. People go, well, there's no point. The police aren't going to do anything. They won't go after people who've stolen phones or bikes or even cars a lot of the time. We know they don't check CCTV. Even if they do make any cursory checks, no one's ever arrested. Even if they are arrested, they're very rarely charged. And even if they are charged, they don't go to court for 2 or 3 years, and they'll probably get a slap on the wrist anyway. And that is not just a perception. That is the reality now. I'm amazed that it's as many as 4 in 10 that are actually reported. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think it is 4 in 10. I think it's a lot less than that.
Really?
The trouble is, we've never had full reporting, and we really don't want full reporting. If every shop reported every shoplifting, the numbers would just go through the roof. But the key thing is this: the criminal justice system is shot. It's been underinvested. We have an ineffectual police service now. Unfortunately, they try their best with the resources they've got.
Do they?
But
They
do. They do. Julia.
I'm not entirely sure they do.
Well,
in my dealings with the
mistakes,
police, I'm not entirely sure they do. I'm pretty sure the only reason why my bag thief he was supposed to be in court, alleged bag thief, supposed to be in court last Thursday, but didn't actually bother turning up. And nothing will happen, I'm sure, for many months indeed. Second time the court date's been moved now. And it's just like, a year on, the only reason they investigated was because I provided all the CCTV, provided everything, and made it very clear I was one of those people who wouldn't take no for an answer. I don't think most other people who had their bags stolen that day have had the same service.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. Don't get me wrong. I think the difficulty is with the sheer amount of crime, the sheer amount of things that they're being asked to do.
They can't
and
do
the
it all.
resources they've got. They just can't do it.
Yeah, but you know what is an idea? Maybe if you arrested and put behind bars the people committing a lot of the crimes, there wouldn't be so many crimes to investigate. Mind-blowing. Phyllis Phillips, thank you for joining us. Short but sweet. Sorry about that. It's a bit of time on dealing with the Afghanistan story. Up next, more from Matthew Lazo. He's going to be telling us what he thinks of performances at PMQs. Yeah, that's up next. We'll take that live. Just the first few questions between Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer. Who's going to win this week? It's the last one before the summer recess. This is Talk Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's just 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have your company. Great also to have the company of Matthew Laza, former Labour Party advisor, joining us today.
Good to be with you.
We're going to be watching PMQs just a few moments. Keir Starmer's already been on his feet, but we'll wait until we get Kemi Badenoch. There's usually a couple of little bits of questions and frankly, a bit of flummery before the main action starts. We'll take that live. We didn't used to, but they've got a bit livelier. I was kind of of the view that, let's get Peter Cardwell to watch this, because frankly, so we don't have to. But it's been getting a bit lively. It's the last one before the end of part.
And they're both there as well. They're not. International duties are not calling.
We did have two weeks of deputy PM questions. Well, I have a funny feeling that the issue of this Afghanistan scandal may come up, but it's a bit difficult, isn't it, for Kemi Badenoch, because of course she's a Tory leader and it happened under a Tory government.
Absolutely, it's very tough for her because her former colleagues were responsible and she was in the cabinet. So what did she know?
Well, Michael Gove knew. We spoke to him earlier. He was in the cabinet at the time, so I think it's very unlikely that Kemi Badenoch did not know. And if she didn't, I mean, maybe that's a different problem. But a lot of the problems that she has when she asks questions is she's criticising her last government, isn't she? Kemi Badenoch on her feet. Let's go straight to PMQs.
Yesterday, the head of the OBR warned the government that higher and higher levels of taxes are bad for growth. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what's bad for growth. 14 years of a Tory government. That's what stagnant growth for 14 years, leaving a £22 billion black hole. What we've achieved, Mr. Speaker, in the first quarter of this year is the highest growth in the G7, something we promised before the election. Investment of £120 billion into this country, which is a record in the first year of any government, and 3 trade deals, all of which will boost growth.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about what he achieved. We just heard that inflation is up again, the worst in the G7. We left him with 2% inflation. We have a borrowing up, unemployment up, taxes are up under his government. The fact is the Prime Minister doesn't get it, so let me tell him. His budget last year had high taxes. That's why the economy is contracting. But, Mr. Speaker, the government has said that they won't put up taxes for people on modest incomes. But they also seem incapable of explaining who is in that category. So can the Prime Minister clear up the confusion and tell us what he thinks a modest income is?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think of the working people across this country who put in every day and don't get back what they deserve, and that's who we're working for. That's who we're fixing the country. The sort of people that work hard but haven't necessarily got the savings to buy themselves out of problems. And, Mr. Speaker, that's who we're working for, and that's why we put the national living wage up. That's an extra £1,400. The national minimum wage up. That's £2,500 a year. The triple lock, Mr. Speaker, that went up pension up £470. And, of course, we're extending childcare, opening free breakfast clubs and free school meals. We know exactly who we're working for. She comes here every week and just talks the country down.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking the country down, I'm talking him down. I asked him what a modest income was. He answered what a working person is. He doesn't know what a modest income is, and even on working people, they cannot define it. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury said that working people are people who don't get a payslip. But millions of self-employed people don't get a payslip. So are the self-employed next in line for a Labour tax rate?
The self-employed were the very people who suffered under their watch, repeatedly suffered under their watch, particularly, if I remember, during COVID, when they didn't get the support that they needed. But she talks the country down, she cherry-picks. We have created, Mr. Speaker, since we've been in government, we've created 380,000 jobs, the employment rate is up, and inactivity is down, the complete opposite of what we inherited.
I don't know where these 3,000 jobs are coming from. Unemployment has gone up every month under his government. And perhaps he should speak to farmers and small business people and find out what those working people think about his government. But, Mr. Speaker, that's not all. We know the Chancellor is launching a review into pension contributions. It's as clear as day why this is. It is because the government is considering taxing them. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that a tax on pension contributions is a tax on working people?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we made absolutely clear manifesto commitments, which she asked me about last week and we're keeping to. I'm not going to write the budget months out from the budget. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the decisions that we took to invest in our NHS, to invest in our public services, all the decisions that they opposed. And it's no wonder that after a first year of a Labour government, business confidence is a 9-year high. That's longer than she's been in government. Mr. Speaker, 384, I'm not withdrawing, I'm going to repeat. Business confidence is at a 9-year high.
Mr. Speaker, he says he's not going to write the budget, but his Chancellor is on the front of the Daily Mirror talking about what she's going to do on taxes. So why can't he do the same in the Chamber? Yes. But I asked him about pension contributions. The truth is he doesn't want to talk about pension contributions. It's all right for the Prime Minister. He has his own special law to stop his personal pension from being taxed. But let's be honest, Mr. Speaker, this is really about choices. My party knows that there is an alternative to tax rises. It's cutting spending, something that they are too scared or perhaps too weak to do. We offered to work with him to reform welfare and make meaningful savings, but his refusal sent a signal, and now the cost of borrowing is rising. The budget is in November, that is months away, and the markets may not wait. What will the Prime Minister be doing over the summer to get a grip on the cost of borrowing?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, they left the most incredible mess in the economy, and now they think that they can lecture others. I think just last week their chairman said that they've done the necessary apologising for the 14 years of failure. They've done the necessary. I didn't hear an apology for the lowest living standards in living history. I didn't hear an apology for the £22 billion black hole. I didn't hear an apology for the Liz Truss mini budget. So maybe she should like to stand up and make that apology now.
Mr. Speaker, he's not doing... Yes. Mr. Speaker, he's not planning on doing anything this summer to fix the economy. The shadow of the last budget is hanging over the entire country. Just yesterday, only the Conservatives supported the two-child benefit cap, because only the Conservatives believe in living within our means. Not Labour, not the Liberal Democrats, not Reform, but it's the end of term, Mr. Speaker, so why don't we go through his end-of-term scorecard? The economy is contracting. Inflation, highest in the G7. Unemployment, up every month under this government. Spending, out of control. Borrowing costs, more expensive than Greece. And this is just the first year, Mr. Speaker. The Labour Party should be ashamed of what it is doing to the country. Mr. Speaker, they can shake their heads as much as they like. The fact is, this summer, they're going to have to go to their constituents and explain why they've been making such a mess over the last 12 months. And isn't the case, Mr. Speaker, that the worst, given that this is just their first year, the worst is yet to come?
We're happily going to go to our constituents. We're going to tell them we promised 2 million extra NHS appointments and we delivered 4 million extra appointments. Mr. Speaker, I've got to upgrade that. It's now 4.5 million extra appointments. So we're going to tell our constituents that. Then we're going to tell them about the free school meals we're rolling about, the free breakfast clubs, the free childcare and school uniform costs. We'll tell them about that. And then when we've done that, we'll move on to affordable houses and tell them about the £39 billion we're investing. When we finish that, we'll tell them about the rail and road upgrades across the country, the £120 billion investment, and of course the 3 trade deals. And Mr. Speaker, we're only just getting started.
OK, well, that was a fairly lively exchange, as I think we'd expected. We didn't see the Prime Minister being asked any questions from the Leader of the Opposition about the Afghanistan scandal. Front page of pretty much every newspaper. She went with the economy. Quite a bitty affair, I thought. I have to say, Matthew Larson's former Labour Party advisor, joining me for the whole show. You're watching that. I mean, OK, in terms of the topics, she couldn't really go on Afghanistan. That she'd just be, criticising her own former government, which doesn't look, not necessarily very well. But we did have the Mansion House speech from the Chancellor last night. She went on the economy. Did she score any points there? Because I'm not sure she did.
I don't think she landed any punches. It was basically going through the motions, wasn't it? It was the end of term. She obviously wanted to do an end of term report card vibe, which she got in at the end. That's the thing that the Tories will want to clip for their social media as their final message of the summer. As you say, Julie, the problem is there's a massive elephant in the room, and it's got Tory fingerprints all over it, which is the Afghan
but even also an awful lot of the financial difficulties the government is in. If you say, there's no welfare reform, why does it need reforming? Because it was allowed to absolutely balloon in the last 5 years. We have 4 of which under the Tory party. And a lot of the other issues and the high tax, tax ballooned under the Tories. I mean, there is an element where as much as we all groan when Keir Starmer says, the first question, Tory governments, she was saying, well, taxes are bad for growth. The Tory government for the last 14 years is bad for growth. Well, yeah, I mean, actually, it is a fair point when Keir Starmer repeatedly says, this is down to what the Tories did for 14 years. This lot, your lot, have made it a lot worse. But my God, pretty much all the problems they could have been dealt with in those 14 years.
Absolutely, and the problem is we've heard that the Tories say we can stop with a year on, we can stop defending our record. I'm afraid that it's going to take a lot more than a year for the British electorate to forget the record. I think the Labour slightly overgoes on Liz Truss, because there was a lot of other 14 years minus 49 days of record to have a go at, including, as you say, things like record taxes.
The Liz Truss budget, though, and people's mortgages suddenly going up, that did actually... Again, the fact that our borrowing costs are now way higher than they were after that Liz Truss budget is a small point I do feel worth making.
It's the gap between ours and other countries' borrowing costs, which ballooned. Everybody's borrowing costs have gone up, and the gap is lower than it was after the Liz Truss disaster.
And again, at the end of the day, the Afghanistan story we've been talking about all day is probably not going to decide how people vote at the next general election. But whether there is growth or not, there isn't much. Whether we've got high inflation, there is. Whether we've got people getting jobs, and there aren't many around. All of those things, they will, whether people's taxes go up or not, they will decide the next election. That is actually the meat and two veg. I've been talking about meat and two veg a lot this week, mostly in relation to Greg Wallace's bits. But this is actually meat and two veg in terms of electioneering. It's the economy, stupid.
He was a greengrocer.
He was a greengrocer. It's people care about the pound in their pocket.
Absolutely, and the government knows that unless the economic situation improves, they're in trouble. They're hoping that what will happen is that there'll still be 2 interest rate cuts this year. At the moment, the market is just factoring 2 in. It's still factoring 2 in, but it's not enough. But it's likely to be slowed down by the fact that inflation is going up, not down.
Yes,
absolutely, and it is the pound in the pocket which will ultimately decide the election. The government hopes that it's going to be that they're front loading the pain, and that they're going to be
and most governments do this, don't they? Come in, they make a load of pledges, and then look, it's terrible, we're going to have to do all this, there's all these expenses. But there seem to be an awful lot of new expenses all the time. And again, one of the key ones we didn't know about was is it 7 billion? Is it 1 billion? Is it 2 billion? Oh, who knows? It's money down the back of the sofa in terms of
which was apparently in the black hole.
The
black hole everybody criticised and said didn't really exist. Well, apparently this was part of the black hole.
Yeah, but
it was factored in.
But it's max 2 billion of that. Come on.
Well, it could be 7 billion, presumably, in some of their account, but we don't know.
But that's what's so extraordinary. We don't know. Why don't we know? Because we've not been allowed to scrutinise it.
And that's why it was particularly outrageous, because we couldn't do the proper scrutiny.
It has not been brought up in the questions between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, but Keir Starmer did give a statement just briefly before PMQs saying that Tories have serious questions to answer about the Afghan data leak. He said, in his short statement, apologies, at the start of the Prime Minister's questions, he said there's always been support across this House of the United Kingdom fulfilling our obligations to Afghans who served alongside British forces. We warned in opposition about Conservative management of this policy, and yesterday the Defence Secretary set out the full extent of the failing that we inherited. A major data breach, a super injunction, a secret route that has already cost hundreds of millions of pounds. Ministers who served under the party opposite have serious questions to answer about how this was ever allowed to happen. Those are pretty damning words, aren't they? I mean, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, yesterday, he was saying, my opposite number, the Shadow Defence Secretary, Cartledge, who was actually a Defence Minister previously, they're being very sort of, oh yes, and we agree, and we apologise, and everyone's being very nicey. Prime Minister not being quite so nicey about the failings of the Tories.
Absolutely. I think that Labour will see this as a real opportunity to get on the front foot. Not least they deserve to get on the front foot because they're having to pay the bill for these Tory mistakes as you go into the summer. to leave.
Well, it was certainly a story. I mean, it was a civil servant working in the MOD.
Absolutely. The Tories put the super injunction on. The Tories decided on the list. The Tories managed the situation, as we've seen, pretty badly. Yeah. So I think this will give Labour a boost going into it because, as we say, although ultimately the pound on the pocket will matter, at the moment people were saying, Kemi didn't even ask one single question on that. Why not? Because she's ashamed of their record.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And again, there's only so many times you can sort of just avoid, you know, as you say, the elephant in the room. And again, we've been talking throughout the show, and lots of calls coming in. I do want to hear from you. Do get in touch about the Tory government, whether they were right or wrong to cover up this massive data leak by a Ministry of Defence, a member of staff, basically revealing the details of thousands of Afghans who supported British forces. Numerous of those people have actually now come to Britain. Huge multi-billion-pound cost, whether it's 7 billion or 2 billion in the end. It's a huge, huge cost. It's a very expensive email. We've all sent the wrong email by accident. But
or WhatsApps.
Yeah, but that's the worst we can possibly imagine. I want to hear from you, though, because, I mean, what's the worst bit of it? Is it the cost? Is it the fact these people are here? Is it the cover-up, the super injunction? We have Michael Gove, now Lord Gove, former member of the government. He was aware of the super injunction from word go. He completely defends it and for how long it's gone on. It seems to me that a very short period of time would have been justified in the matter of months, 6 months maybe. Everything after that has been a cover-up, in my view. But we don't know because we've not been allowed to scrutinise this. And even some of these sort of, you know, is it the Joint Intelligence Committee, JIC, in Parliament, senior figures, you know, ex-MI5 and people like, you know, peers and people who served in government who were absolutely signed the Official Secret Act. They're not going to, you know, spill the beans on this. They've not been allowed to know about this and spill the beans on it. But interesting, you know, the Daily Mail and the Times knew about it and were fighting in the courts to try and get this made public. And well done to them for doing that. That's what we've got a free media for, guys. I know everyone slags us off, but that's what they do. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and then your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. I have to tell you this bit. Text costs £1, Saturday network rate message. Got a load of calls. I'd love to get some more calls on this. Lots of different points of view. I'd particularly like to hear from anyone who's been an ex-serviceman or woman about what you think about this. Was it the right thing to do? How many of these people should we have come here? 0344 499 1000. Just before we go to a break, I just want to raise the story. It's just come out in the last few moments. Suella Braverman, remember, of course, the former Home Secretary, still a member of the Conservative Party, failed to be, in fact, failed to run in the end, didn't she, from the leadership. Her husband, back in December 2024, so December last year, he defected from the Conservatives to Reform. A lot of speculation that can be based. So that Suella Braverman would do the same. Yeah. It'd be weird if the Conservative leader defected.
It would be a bit strange.
Even I think that might be a bit beyond the pale. He has just tweeted in the last half hour or so that he has left Reform effective immediately. Now, is this a flaky person who's gone from the Tories to Reform and now leave and thought they were the party for him and not the party for him, or is this telling us something else? Is there something going on at Reform? We know we've seen Sir Jake Berry, the former Conservative Party chairman, he's defected to Reform. But again, many might argue, here's an ex-MP looking for a new job in the future, more likely to get one. With Reform, maybe Sanders an MP. I mean, you know, but a lot of people
I work with Jake Berry and I made that very point to him.
Did you? What
yes.
did he say?
Well, he says absolutely not. I don't want to go back into politics. I'm just doing it because as I laid out in his op-ed in the Sun, he says that's what I believe in for the country, and we leave everyone to judge his words.
Okay, and I'm sure then he won't be trying to stand for office and getting another job. But no, but that's the reality. Is that, you know, is this someone who's just sort of realised it's not the party for them, or are there issues with what's going on Reform, particularly over the wide range of people they're trying to appeal to, yes. Not just Labour and Tories, but even different wings of the Tory party?
I think one danger is that they import the Tory civil war. Do you remember the five families? Then it went up to 7 or something that they were in the dying days of the Tory party. People with different positions. Jake is slightly different in his politics to some of the people who've already gone and joined Reform from the Tories. I think he's
a Remainer.
He was a Remainer and he voted for Tom Tugendhat for leader.
Yeah,
and that's
I'm not quite sure that doesn't say Reform to me. Suella Braverman's husband, we might perhaps expect to be more on the right of the party and therefore more likely to be, more sympathetic to reform stances on
exactly.
things.
I think that's what the debate is should reform just become a kind of a lifeboat for Tories, who think that the party itself is a busted flush, or should it stick to its original ideology? And I think that's the debate.
Well, my thing is it should stick to the original ideology, and if people aren't signed up to it and aren't likely to be genuine to signed up to it, I don't think they should be allowed in the party. I think that should be a given, shouldn't it?
Well, I think that's the view of Suella's husband. People like Jake would argue they do believe in the core values of the party.
They just didn't a couple. Yeah, well, we'll see. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Give us a call 0344 499 1000 in terms of reforms, leadership, and others. Coming up in the next half hour, after we take your calls and get to your messages, we will be talking about Labour finally accepting. I know, mind blowing, that they do accept that a trans woman isn't a woman. It actually has to be someone who's actually a woman. We're also going to be talking about the nurse in NHS 5, Sandy Pegg, who we understand has won her battle against apparently gross misconduct for saying, yeah, I'm a woman, I'm a nurse, I'm changing in the women's changing room, and there's a bloke here pretending he's a woman who's a doctor who's insisting on watching me while I get into my underwear, and I'm not happy about it. Yeah, it turns out she was right to complain. I know, I'm as surprised as you are. Oh yeah, and we'll talk more about the BBC in crisis over MasterChef. But were they right to drop John Turode as a co-presenter as well after sacking Greg Wallace? We'll talk about all of that. That's coming up. Get some more of your calls. This is Talk. Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at. I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, we took the highlights, well, supposedly the highlights of PMQs, the exchange between Kemi Badenoch and the Prime Minister a few moments ago, but no mention of Afghanistan whatsoever. A statement from the Prime Minister read out in advance where he's very critical of the Conservatives, basically saying that ministers who served under the party opposite have serious questions to answer about how this was ever allowed to happen. As Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, he's asked his first two questions about the Afghan data breach, and he said he would support public inquiry into the data breach, and talked about the shocking Afghan data breach, and he'll have a support if the Prime Minister says if he decides to pursue a public inquiry. Matthew Lawson, I think that's already been ruled out as not necessary to have a public inquiry, but there'll be formal questions like the Defence Select Committee. Do you think that's fair? Do you think people? There is an element where a public inquiry, great, let's just spend more of our sodding money on finding out stuff. Can't we just require that people just say what actually happened and just issue their statements?
Absolutely.
And we can question them?
Public inquiries are expensive, they're long, and of course in something like an area like this, there'll be lots of times say, the data has to be withheld for national security reasons.
Waste of time.
So I'm not sure it will actually fly. You can understand why David went in it, and he'll be gleefully thinking, I can do the big story of the day, and the leader of the opposition can't.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's get some of your messages. We'll get to your calls in a moment. Joey says, can't even get my head around the level of incompetence here, the full-scale cover-up of the one MOD employee and then by the Conservative Party under super injunction has cost the UK taxpayers £7 billion and probably rising. Well, they say it's not going to be £7 billion, but we don't even know where that number's come from. Tina says, those Afghans risked their lives by working with the British. We had a duty to protect them from the Taliban. That could only be done in secrecy. Evan says, if you or I hid our dealings from the government, would we not be punished? And Dave says it should only be kept out of the public domain if it's in the national security interest to do so. I don't see how this incident meets that criteria. Mike says the real issue is the cover-up of the smuggling in of Afghans, not the data breach. Oscar says disgraceful that people are not told the truth before they voted. And Brett says, why have these aisles, had to take in another country's armed forces? So we go into Afghanistan and work alongside the Afghan army. Then we left Afghanistan because Biden decided to withdraw USA troops. Then we have to take in the Afghan army and all their relatives. The moral of the story, folks, for British politicians is don't follow the US into any conflict in future. Why? Because the UK ends up dealing with their mess. And Norman says, why has no one made the point that the Afghans who work with us were actually fighting for their own country? It's not as if they were coerced into doing us a huge favour. Yeah, I have to say, I genuinely don't understand why Afghan soldiers have a right to come here.
And do we
I don't understand that. I'm sorry.
Do we have evidence that people... I mean, you can understand if you were directly a translator or you were working at a senior level for the British forces or the other allied forces.
They're at risk.
They're at risk. But if you're just in the Afghan army, is there evidence the Taliban are kind of doing mass reprisals against people in the army? 70,000 of the people, they have the 100,000 they've identified aren't going to be brought here, so clearly they think not. Let's go to the phone lines. Richard is in London. Richard, what are your concerns about this story? Now we know about it.
I share your concern that actually there's a very large number of people here, and we're not actually sure that all of these people need to be protected in this way. But I think the point that's in danger of being lost, Julia, is that this was covered up because immigration is a hot potato.
Yeah.
And the fact that Axel Rudakabana had rice in his flat, that was covered up for until Halloween, until for the 1st of March.
When it would have been known about within hours of him being arrested.
Yes. So that was covered up for nearly 4 months because of the hot potato. And David Starkey said recently, apparently, that no country has been changed so much in terms of its demographics, unless it's had either an invasion or lost a war. Now, it's quite remarkable that actually that would appear to be the case. Our country's changed so much in such a relatively short period of time, sort of 30 years in terms of the demographics. Simply, there's no historical precedent. Yeah. I just think we should step back, and I think certainly the leaders of both the opposition parties should be saying, because of the concern, because it's all a hot potato, and we know it's a hot potato because government keeps hiding things. So because it's a hot potato, we need to suspend our membership of the EHCR because we have serious concerns about the possible social cohesion and civil unrest of things going wrong. Yeah. And the other thing, Julie, is that countries like Poland and Hungary, they're in the EHCR, but they only see its edicts as advisory.
The European Court of Human Rights and European Convention. Well, exactly. Most other countries, even the EU edicts, they ignore half of those. I mean, I would go further than you. I think the demographic changes have been so great. I think we absolutely need to be talking about. And again, I don't even think it's a right-wing issue. There are so many people here who have no right to be here, overstayed their visas illegally, not working legally. I want everyone out. I literally, guys, you've got a month to get out. Go. You're not welcome welcome here, and things are going to get very, very nasty for you if you do stay here. I would be trumping a lot of this stuff. I've got every support for these ICE agents going on. I really think we are stuck with an awful lot of people here who I don't think are a bonus to this country, either economically or culturally. And I think that the scale has been so insane, the new arrivals, particularly from cultures that are very, very different from ours. And I think we're pretty sure that the Afghan culture is a very different culture from Western British liberal values. And this has not been addressed. And anyone who raises it, just call them a bigot. And then that's the end of the debate. That's all that's happened, hasn't it?
Yes, and they wanted to. The point is that the other thing that actually I think is kind of shied away from. Labour do have. They wanted to rub their noses in diversity.
They did, and they made it blatant. They said that literally.
I mean, it is fairly clear. I mean, there are no real economic arguments for immigration on this scale. Yep. Even if you take this myth about the Windrush, I mean, Germany and Japan were both destroyed a great deal more than Britain was in the last war, when they didn't have anything like they didn't have an immigration program on.
No, but the people who came over on the Windrush, I mean, those people came to improve their own lives, living in in shacks in very poor Caribbean nations, and they came over. The idea that they built Britain, rubbish. I mean, the people came over as they're great. They came over legally, absolutely entitled to do. They came to this country to work to improve their own lives.
Yes, and I think what Starkey's onto, Julia, is that actually, I think the left are trying to create a new type of society, and I think that
I think you're right.
We've got to call them out.
Yeah,
we've got to call them out.
Yeah, well, again, their idea is, again, it all comes to the fact that moral relativism, this theory they've got that everyone is the same, every culture is the same, each one is equal. Well, yeah, you know what? When women are allowed to go to university and girls are allowed to go to school and not cover their faces and leave their homes without permission of a man, maybe that culture is not equal with ours, and we don't necessarily want to import that. I'm old-fashioned, but there we are. Richard, thank you for your call. Very thoughtful. Matthew Larser, you're a former Labour Party advisor. I find, though, that you and I find ourselves agreeing on quite a lot more than we disagree on. There was a deliberate policy by the left, Tony Blair was to absolutely put booster rockets under immigration in this country by any means, economic, asylum, you name it. Come on in, the water's lovely. And a lot of that was based on the idea that that us being a very white country wasn't a good thing, and that everyone who came from every other culture was adding to our nation economically and culturally, and it was diversity was our strength. Now, this has all been proven to be absolutely the opposite of the truth. Do you have any regrets over that?
So I think what Labour did do, and there's no shying away from it, is it did think that that the country had effectively a labour shortage, and that it could use EU migration, which is what it did. It was why, remember when Tony Blair didn't put in place the protections when the Eastern European countries first joined the EU, and countries like Germany did put in place those protections. They weren't permanent, but they were transitions.
13,000 people they predicted would turn up.
13,000, and it was 1.3 million in the first, or something.
I mean, it's an easy mistake to make.
Absolutely. And I remember Jack Straw was then a senior minister going on saying, it's only going to be, literally it's going to be a few thousand. And of course, that's when public trust went. I personally think there was and is a case for some sort of free movement in terms of boosting the labour market here. Lots of people from the EU went home. Become
3.5 million stayed.
3.5 million did stay, but I don't think it was about sort of whiteness, because frankly, almost all the EU immigrants came. So I think it was about.
Well, no, we were told we were racist for voting for Brexit to limit the number of people who apparently are white coming from Europe.
Yeah, I think the messaging around that was just insane.
It's difficult to keep up with what makes us racist this week.
Is the difference, because what happened is that I think Boris Johnson, by saying one thing, did another, which is consciously, effectively said that, the only way we can make up for what he's perceived as economic weakness was by bringing in 1.5 million people in a year.
Yeah, and basically import pretty much the Indian subcontinent. That's what we did.
And that's not what Tony Blair did.
But again. You're all as bad as each other, I think is what most of us are thinking. There we are. Matthew Lawson, thank you very much. Up next, going to take a quick break. I do want to hear from you. More calls on Afghanistan or anything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk to Sex Matters' Fiona McInerney about Sandy Peggy, the NHS nurse who has won her tribunal about not being forced to get changed down to a bra and knickers in front of a man who claims he's a woman. Oh, yeah, and Labour have finally decided they know what a woman is. I know, I'm so excited. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:38 is the time. Matthew Lars is still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Delighted to be joined now by the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, that's Fiona McInerney, to discuss, well, a little bit of sanity creeping into the world. We've got a lot of insanity at the moment, so it's nice to have a little brief corner of sanity on the show. Fiona, thank you for joining us.
Good to see you, Julia.
We were planning to talk about Labour amazingly finally accepting that trans women aren't women. I mean, something that my entire audience has always known all along. But the thing I really want to talk to you about is Sandy Peggy. Now, explain who she is and the court case, well, the tribunal case, it appears that she has just won.
Yes, I'm not quite sure she's won the case. Two different things going on. So Sandy Peggy is a long-term emergency nurse who did night shifts at a hospital in Fife and was made to share changing rooms with a male doctor.
Women's changing room.
Women's changing rooms with a young man because he said he was a woman. And eventually it got too much for her and she said she didn't find that acceptable. He reported her and she was suspended, and she's been suspended from work since then, which was January. So she's been suspended from work since January. She was subject to disciplinary to investigate whether she was guilty of gross misconduct. And that is what she's just won. So it turns out, we just found out today that they held a hearing at the hospital in June, accused her of having misgendered this nurse.
Well, correctly gendered him.
Indeed. And also he had made accusations that because she didn't like him, because he was trans, that she'd walked out on a patient. And those are very serious allegations, very serious, because that calls into question her fitness to practice. She could have been struck off. All of that has gone away. So that's
never happened.
Indeed. And now she's back in the tribunal because while all this misery was going on, she brought a case against her employer and against the doctor to say, you are sexually harassing me, because making a woman share the women's changing rooms with a man is harassment.
But it is absolutely fascinating. All week, the news, we've had a story about how Greg Wallace was acting inappropriately, being sacked from the BBC because he would expose himself to usually women members of staff, OK? But that's definitely unacceptable. But absolutely acceptable if he had claimed that he thought he was a woman, for him to be able to do that in a woman's changing room, it would appear. I mean, this is the madness and the doublethink that we're in, that a woman should be forced to be in her underwear in front of a completely strange man just because he's grown his hair, put a dress on and says he's a woman.
Yes, and bear in mind that hospital staff, clinical staff particularly, have to come to work in ordinary clothes and then for hygiene reasons get changed into their scrubs at work. So she didn't have an alternative. She did her best to avoid confrontation with this man, but in the end, that's what happened. The defence this morning in the tribunal, which we've been hearing, is that all the other hospital trusts were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So this is happening.
So it's okay. But there have been other cases, haven't there, with more group of nurses who brought a case themselves as well. And there's a big expectation, hasn't there been, since the Supreme Court ruling a few months ago that, yes, funnily enough, the law not only is but has always been the case since sex biological difference was recognised, that a woman is biologically a woman and not whether a piece of paper says it or whether someone thinks it on a Wednesday afternoon. I mean, and you'd have thought that all these tribunal cases would have just disappeared straight away anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's really the worrying part of this, is it tells you how deeply entrenched this belief system is, that people think that the only way to be accommodating of people who identify as trans, the only way not to discriminate against them, is to play along with them at the expense of everyone else's rights. Now, clearly, that can't be right, because we all have rights. Yeah. And what needs to happen is to find some kind of balance. But yes,
but there was this idea, though, wasn't there, that a trans woman, let's call them what they are, trans-identified man, would feel uncomfortable undressing with other men. Well, Yeah, for the same reason, so would a woman. But yeah, don't worry about the women. Don't worry about the women. No, no, no. I mean, it's not like women fought for decades to get these sort of basic rights. It's not like there's a reason why women don't want to be getting naked with men. Oh, and of course not. But let's put the feelings of a tiny number of men, let's put those ahead of half of the population's demands and rights and needs, and legal rights indeed. It is mind-blowing. It is amazing to me how slow, but not surprising to me, how slow the Supreme Court ruling has permeated. We were discussing, women's sports, and the majority of sporting bodies haven't changed their ways on that, and it's still ongoing. But it's interesting that the Labour Party has finally accepted that trans women aren't women, and they are not legally women. I mean, given that we have a Prime Minister who, until only, April, was of the view that about 30,000 women in this country had penises, that's quite a big change, isn't it?
Very welcome change. It's great to see a bit of leadership. That's what's going wrong here. The Supreme Court has given us a common sense ruling that everyone can understand. There's nothing complicated about it. And we really need to see everyone step up now and just do what they know needs doing. So the Labour Party has finally declared, the National Committee of the Labour Party has said, all women shortlists, women's officers, women's, sections, meetings are for women.
I mean, yeah.
That's where we are.
Well, that's what I've always loved when they talk about, first woman chancellor. They could have put any bloke in that job who said, I identify as a woman. And then under their thought process, they'd have had to have said, no, this is the first woman chancellor. That's the insanity. And the thing is, I both know the insanity in a lot of this and the dangers in a lot of this starts much, much earlier for an awful lot of people. And I know that you share a lot of my concerns about gender ideology. And it is an ideology. It's a political ideology being pushed on children from a very, very, very young age. Big concerns about new sex education guidance in schools that was published yesterday. And it's it's went bad under the Tories anyway. I'm absolutely furious with them still. But their proposals to ban lessons on gender identity, and also lots of the stuff not to be taught until children were, at least over the age of 9. We've seen some extraordinary things that have been taught to children at a very young age. But Labour has paved the way for lessons on gender identity, even in primary schools for children. This is a particular concern to me. I've got young nephews, and I've got friends who've got kids at nursery school where they seem to have a Pride March virtually every month. I mean, it's just extraordinary. The absolute explosion of obsession with gender identity and the teaching of this as a real thing. You could be non-binary or this or that, to young children who don't even know, 2 + 2 = 4 yet. I find very, very worrying and troublesome.
Yes, and there's been a huge void in schools because teachers have been crying out for some clear guidance about what they're supposed to do. So what we've got with this new guidance on sex education is, I think, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's good news that they've kicked out silly notions like, that everyone's on a spectrum from Barbie to G.I. Joe. Yeah. I mean, we've spent decades trying to get rid of sex stereotypes, and yet the concept of gender identity was being taught using exactly those kind of stereotypes. So that's one thing, at least, that's now been outlawed. But the draft guidance under the previous government said they shouldn't be teaching about gender identity at all because it's not a proven fact. They should be teaching everyone's male or female because biological sex is a proven fact.
Yep.
This guidance has watered that down. They've said, don't teach that everyone has a gender identity. Well, why would you even be talking about gender identity? So that is not really...
Most adults can't grasp the difference between gender identity and biological sex. The idea of, a 7-year-old can.
Yes, and then the other problem is they've not made clear, and we're still waiting for the guidance on what teachers are supposed to do when a child comes in who's a boy and says they're a girl. Now, it's pretty obvious.
Tell them they're not.
Well, it's pretty obvious that that boy cannot be allowed to go everywhere the girls go, because that's just a complete abandonment of safeguarding. It's not because the boy's a threat. It's because the simple principle of separating male and female in certain situations.
Toilets, changing rooms,
The basic, and you're not making judgments about any one person.
You can think what you think, but we shouldn't be encouraging it in children. I mean, this is one of the most damaging. It's child abuse. As simple as that. We call it what it is. It's child abuse. No child is born in the wrong body. No child is trans.
Absolutely, and we still need the courage and leadership, I think, from someone in government to say to everyone in schools, we safeguard children in part by keeping male and female.
Well, we didn't get it from the last Education Secretary. I doubt very much we're going to get it from Bridget Phillipson, that's for sure. Great to talk to you, Fiona McInerney. Keep up the fantastic work at Sex Matters. 12:48 time. Very quick word from Matthew Larser. Your lot are even worse than the last lot. That's the trouble.
Well, I mean, what the Labour Party's doing in this is abiding by the Supreme Court judgment.
No, they're not. Well, the Labour Party are, but what about what's going on in schools? Do you think children should be taught you may be non-binary, you may not have the same gender identity as your biological sex?
Well, I think that the most interesting point that Fiona made there was that we got to a stupid place in schools where you were teaching using gender stereotypes, gender non-conformity.
That's what trans ideology is. It's just about gender stereotypes.
Which is clearly nonsense. So schools will have to be compliant with Supreme Court judgment, like the Labour Party and like everybody else. Yes, I think schools are crying out for guidance, and the government is going to have to provide
I don't think any school should need guidance on whether or not you teach fact or fiction. Simple as that. Fact or fiction, that's all it is. And any teacher who wants to teach fiction rather than fact to children, other than as, literary, books, I genuinely think we need to sweep out a whole load of teachers from education system. I don't think these people should be anywhere near children in the classroom. I genuinely think they are a threat to our children. It's as simple as that, because they are telling them things that are simply untrue. 12:49 is the time. Up next, going to talk about the BBC. Is anyone going to be left after they sack everyone for saying the wrong word 20 years ago? This is Talk, the home of common sense. Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive. We've been looking at...
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:52 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to my last guest. Actually, the interesting thing, this is a topic we've been talking about all week, but yeah, the Afghanistan issue rather overtaken the news. But the BBC has axed now both presenters of MasterChef. Yesterday, John Turode found out apparently from seeing in the media that he had also been sacked alongside Greg Wallace, who was sacked a week ago over behaviour whilst working on the show. But is this the BBC doing the right thing, or is this the BBC basically operating a scorched earth policy, throwing everyone under the bus in a bid to protect BBC executives from losing their jobs? Let's talk to a former BBC executive, Roger Bolton. Very good afternoon to you, Roger.
And to you, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. It does appear that the accusations against John Turode very, very different from Greg Wallace, and he identified himself as the person who was, not named in the big report carried out into what had happened at MasterChef by Banjay Productions, saying that he had been accused of saying an unacceptable racial word in either 2018 or 2019. No one even knows what year, let alone what the actual event where this had happened. Apparently, it was all accepted by everyone involved that he wasn't malicious. Whether he was using lyrics of a song or not, we don't know. And that no one thought there was any particular issue there. But he has now been sacked, apparently, we are told, for using that word, possibly in 2018, possibly in 2019, some years ago. Was that the right decision by the BBC, or do you think something else is going on here?
I don't think something else is going on there, but I don't know. The problem is we don't know the word that was used. The report was conducted by solicitors independently for the independent company, not by the BBC. And the BBC obviously thought that what happened was serious enough to sack John. I don't know. That's the point. What we do know. The other case, first case, is that, what went on for a very long period. A large number of people were found very uncomfortable and offended, and that the person involved doesn't really understand himself and his own behaviour. I think
you're talking about Greg Wallace. I mean, a lot of the allegations against him, it transpired when we saw the details. The majority were upheld, but actually most of them had taken place long before 2018. He'd apparently been given a talking to, had changed his behaviour and had massively improved. And even at that point, I'm thinking, well.
Hold on. You made the statement he's massively improved. We had after 1918.
We're told.
2018. We don't know. What we do know is that separately, a BBC News investigation uncovered 50 more complaints. I think the truth is we don't know whether he altered his behaviour or not. But what seemed to be from his reaction, and by the way, he put his retaliation in first, didn't he, to try and influence the way the debate went, doesn't show a lot of self-knowledge.
No, indeed. This claim about autism and the like, and I don't think anyone's really buying a lot of that. But the John Turode issue seems very different. Now, look, I think we'd all heard in the business that, both men, frankly, were a bit of a pain to work with. I think but let's face it, as well as I do, a lot of big stars are. Some are very lovely, some frankly, are monsters. And we know it in many organisations, actually, a lot of people are allowed to behave, when they become those big stars, they get away with behaviour which no one else would be able to get away with. But my issue with, say, John Turode, now, again, I've no idea what happened. I don't know what the word was. But if someone, a few years ago, but no one can really remember when, heard him say a word, he says doesn't even know what he said, which was apparently a racial word, but it wasn't meant maliciously, like he was quoting something or whatever he was doing, that should be someone should earn the sack for that. I find that utterly extraordinary because if he was walking around, and no one seems to be claiming this, racially abusing people or saying outrageously racist things, you know what, I don't want him employed on the BBC. But that's not what the allegation is.
Well, hold on a second. The fact is we don't know. I mean, I share with you a concern about free speech being, there's a danger to free speech here. But equally, we're talking about young people, in particular in the industry, on short-term contracts.
Sod them. Young people complain about someone looking at them in the wrong tone of voice, for goodness sake.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Thank another balanced contribution. Thank you very much, Julia.
No, it is my balanced contribution. I genuinely think most young people will be better off getting a slap rather than being pandered to. Yes, I genuinely believe that.
That's a nice generalised comment. But OK, fine. We come back to the basic question is we don't know enough about the detail. We should know more. I agree with you there's a worry about free speech. But also, I mean, lawyers on the whole don't say something in a report unless they're absolutely 100% it's true and that it is deeply offensive.
But they didn't even know what year he'd said it.
Well, All I can say to you is we need more information, but that for you to jump to the conclusion, which you imply, that this guy's been unjustly fired because of something which wasn't very important.
We're given the reason we have been given is because of this racial word, even though the report says they accept it wasn't said in a malicious way. That's insane. If they were saying, but there are actually lots of other things we're not going to go into, they haven't said that.
Well, I agree that there should be more information about that, but you're leaping to conclusions on the basis of no evidence and on your own prejudices. You know, I'm doubtless prejudiced, but you are on this one. You're jumping to one assumption
Listen, I don't watch the show. I don't hold a candle for either of these guys. If there's been wrongdoing, my concern is if, as we have been told, this is why he has been sacked, that's what it appears the BBC have told his agent, unless everyone's lying, that's an absurd reason for someone to be sacked.
Look at the report by Lewis Sook and the lawyers. Look what they say.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And on the basis of that, it's serious. Now, I agree with you.
No, it's not. No. Someone not maliciously using a racial word, possibly 6 years ago, possibly 5 years ago, is not serious. No, it's not.
That is your interpretation.
No, I'm not interpreting anything. That's what they said in the report by Lewis Silkin.
Well, I'm saying two things, I suppose, in the end. One is, in this particular instance, we don't have enough information. We should have more. Yeah. Secondly, the question of trust. You do not have trust in either, it would appear, the BBC or those solicitors. I have more trust than you do, but we need more evidence before we can generalise that this is, in any sense, a real threat to freedom of speech.
OK, all right, then. We'll agree on that. French Roger Bolton, former BBC executive, Matthew Larser, just coming in on this.